Back. Got some tea at hand. Got some peach tea today. Ran out of the iced tea, which is fine. I gotta make some more for this weekend actually. Whew. I've got to take a minute to take a breath. I just literally just now got off the phone with just a very difficult customer service situation. So gotta take a moment, gotta breathe, relax, and get into this stuff. I hope everyone's having a great day. Significantly less stressful than my last hour or so was. And I wasn't really sure exactly what to do today. Uh, it gets easier when there's like scheduled stuff, like these are the questions. But we don't have that this week. That's next week. And we should have a guest for that. So stay tuned. Be excited. That'll be Thursday the 9th, I guess. And so I was like, what should we do today? I was like, well, we've been enjoying those like Jubilee middle ground videos. They're very ridiculous and it's oftentimes like really weighted. But also, we keep watching flat Earth videos because they're very funny. And as it turns out, Jubilee has a middle ground for with flat Earthers and versus scientists. I can't imagine that they would weight things towards flat Earthers. They often put a thumb on the scale towards like the conservative group. It's often people with like media training and like they're like professional grifters or like they have huge followings. And then on the liberal side, first of all, they're liberals and not like leftists. And they'll be like, here's a college student we found. They probably have a Twitter, maybe. Yeah, I guess they do. It's like 400 subscribers, or followers, or whatever they call it. So I can't imagine they're gonna like weight the scale that much for either side here. But I'm curious to see where this goes. We've talked about a lot of flat Earth stuff. Let's get right into it.
Back to
All right.
middle ground.
Before we jump in, we've got
They're
a
gonna
huge
they've
announcement.
gotta
A
jump.
lot of folks have been asking
Oh,
for
well,
this for years.
there we go.
We're
Much
finally
better.
giving you the first ever.
Share it with
Okay, I
the
don't
end.
care about their
about it.
podcast.
For now, enjoy the episode.
All right, let's enjoy the episode. We're enjoying here. Ooh, that's interesting. They actually have like the little models there, and the flat Earth model. You gotta wonder like if any of the flat Earthers are seething at that model because every flat Earther has a different concept of what the Earth looks like. It's not like there's the flat Earth model that they're all talking about. They all have very different ideas, right? We saw one person who thought it was infinite in all directions. We had one person who thought it like constantly was moving up, accelerating upwards. There was yeah, like crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. So I wonder how much like I wonder if it'll come. I really hope it comes up. I missed the question though,
For
so
now,
we'll back it
enjoy
up
the episode.
a few seconds. So we
One
can.
on my right, sphere.
Oh, it's just
If
to
you
say.
think that is the shape of the Earth, point
Okay.
to it now.
Okay. Oh, it's just indicating who's who because they're not doing the same normal way. Okay. So they're mostly separated down the line, but wasn't exactly. Okay, well, I guess they are doing the same thing. I don't know why they said that. Okay.
32 minutes past the hour.
Now they agreed that to the shape, but maybe they agree with the model as well. I don't know. I don't know where to start. Okay, so it seems like they are waiting it of like. No, like we went to the moon though. Like there's like NASA exists. There's evidence. It's not all. It's not all. It's not all nonsense. It's all not all made up. Okay, they're waiting things from the scientists. Maybe that's fine. Or I hope so at least.
I don't think. I know for a fact it's a globe.
The Earth is flat.
It's like we have this picture of.
Also, I will say this is something that is a problem not just of this model of content, also debates, also a lot of things, but unfortunately it's somewhat unavoidable. Well, I'll explain it and then I'll go into the thoughts, which is basically the idea of like when you put these two people against each other, it seems like these are two sides of the same argument and therefore worthy of equal credence. But that's often not the case, especially in something like this. It is not flat Earth as an idea is not nearly of equal merit as a globe Earth scientific model. This is part of why I point out that no two flat Earthers believe the same thing about the properties of the Earth because they're not talking about the same thing. It's not a model. It's a refusal to accept scientific evidence. Whereas the globe model is a model. We understand it. We understand a lot about it. We can know things. We can make novel, testable predictions, as we've heard T-Jump very concisely say. I do like that how concise that little bite is. Novel, testable predictions. Each of those means something, and it's a big part of science. And that exists for the globe model, but not for the flat Earth model. And yet here they are. We position them across from each other like they're equals. Now the people are equals, but their beliefs and their thoughts that they're here to represent are not. And this is just kind of like I said, it's kind of unavoidable when you have stuff like this, where you have people talking with each other, which I think is good to have. When you have debates, which I think can be good to have. The only real solution to this is to understand that these positions are not equal, and therefore don't present the indefensible one. But then that leads you down a rabbit hole of like, well, how do you ever have debates? Because you're going to believe things. You have to argue against someone who disagrees with that. Now there are scientific debates of like between hypotheses of like equal merit or like similar merit or like maybe interpretations of stuff. Like you can do stuff like that, but that's incredibly high level. Like you need a lot of education to understand that. So I'm not going to go on about it, but it is something I thought of as we were beginning this. And it's important to keep in mind. These people, like the ideas these people are espousing are not the same. And it's kind of interesting that you have like the first person that spoke, the subheader under his name said scientist, and the other one said flat earther. And it can trick people. I don't think this is it. I don't think Julie is trying to trick people. I just mean in the sense of like that can be interpreted by people as like, well, those are equivalent, and they're not. You might as well say like expert person who's wrong, you know. And also, just saying scientist is kind of weird. Like, did they get scientists who would be right to speak about this? Like, if you get, I don't know, like a biologist, that their work doesn't have anything to do with the shape of the Earth. At least I don't think so. So while they might accept and understand the science or whatever, they might not be ready for a flat Earth debate necessarily. That might not be their area of expertise, or like they might not have cared to look at it. They might have thought like, oh, I can just handle this, and not realize all the stuff you have to know. You have to know everything about everything to argue with a flat earther, and you can be more closer or further from that, at the very least in terms of your expertise. So I wonder if these people, what their expertise is. I wonder if we'll see it. Does it show who these people are? Okay. Well, we only have 4 of the people. Wait, we have 6 people here, but 2 of them don't have any links or whatever. One of them has links to a novel, and then here are the flat Earth people. Yeah, Dan the Waterman. I don't know. I don't know if we haven't seen him yet, so we don't know if he's flat earther. But it's interesting of like if these are the scientists and these are the flat earthers. It's interesting how there's no like links to them. Now it might be because like they're scientists. They don't necessarily have a YouTube channel. They're doing work. You know, they might have a Twitter, but you know, they're not necessarily big on it. They might just not have anything that represents them on the internet because that's just not how they engage with the world, and that's reasonable. But it does end up meaning that the flat earthers become more accessible here in the description for however many people even look in the description of a YouTube video.
Reality that's a big
Again,
puzzle piece.
I'm not saying this like
and then one of those pieces
Jubilee Pro.
just wasn't fitting.
I'm always open to having a discussion with someone who is holding a
James is one of the
wrong
scientists
belief like this.
That's what I thought.
Willing to change your mind on this?
I'm not.
Oh, I didn't
Wrong
see.
belief like this.
Are you willing to change your mind on this?
I'm not. The evidence.
Yeah. So
is
two of the 3 scientists don't have any link whatsoever, and then I believe Spencer was the third one. We'll go take a look real quick. Has a link to a novel of all things. It's possible that Dan the Waterman is the last. I don't know. It's either Dan or Spencer. That's the last scientist, and I don't remember who the first guy was. I think the first guy we saw was Spencer actually. Yeah, I can't really tell from the quick stuff we're seeing here. 650 subscribers, interesting. Okay.
Much. Nobody wants to be a flat earther, but if you showed me incontrovertible evidence, I would definitely go back. Who wants the ridicule?
Where are you hoping to get from the discussion with the other side?
I'd like to tear them to pieces.
Hell yeah, Dan. What up? All right, I like that guy already. And for what it's worth, as much as, by the way, this is really important. As much as the flat Earth guy in the blue, I'm blanking on everyone's name. Hopefully they do what they did with the last Jubilee video, where like every time they're on screen it shows their name, because otherwise I will not remember. While it seems like, oh, I'm open to evidence because like, oh, if I've shown incontrovertible evidence, then I'll change my mind. Remember, for a flat earther, there's no such thing. First of all, incontrovertible is like that's a standard that you can set at any level of I don't know, strictness, of like you could show very, very strong evidence. Well, I could possibly argue with it, maybe this is I don't know, maybe you lied about this information or whatever. Like you can never prove anything 100% for sure, though that isn't necessarily what he's saying. It leaves him able to play games like that. And like, of course, a flat earther never accepts any actual evidence. They'd rather make up facts about the world than accept that their position is wrong. I've seen flat earthers say like, oh, well, if this airline flight exists, that would disprove the flat earth because the route would be too long. And then someone points out, hey, it does exist. And they go, oh, I don't think that flight is real. Okay, well then, short of literally putting you on that flight, and like you might argue that's not actually what happened, I don't know. Like, short of actually putting you on that flight, you would never accept evidence. Like, you're basically lying about saying that if that flight exists, it would disprove you, because you would change your mind because it does exist and you didn't. So this is so we'll see if he's that intractable, but like it's usually how things go.
Underdown, Executive Director of the Center for Inquiry West in Los Angeles and the chair of
that's
the
pretty impressive
CFI Investigations Group.
Yeah, that's
I'm
impressive.
Spencer Marks, one of the senior members of the
Spencer
CFI
is the last
Investigations
scientist.
Group, Science Advocate.
And it was a link to his novel.
I am Marina Yeri. I'm a theoretical physicist, and I'm with the university.
It's one of those like, I don't know what kind of scientist would be the right person to argue with a flat earther. It's interesting that none of these people, like theoretical physics, I don't think deals very much with the Earth but like maybe it does. I don't know. Maybe a geologist would be good to have here, but they don't have one. Maybe geologists are like, or maybe too many geologists realize that this is a nonsense argument, so why would they be here? And maybe like aren't accustomed to having public debates or something, like, I don't know. But you would think there'd be a geologist. Maybe these people have expertise in that field, but it is a little bit like, well, if you're going to get scientists, shouldn't you get people whose expertise is on a subject that would debunk this? There aren't scientists who are like, I'm a globe Earth scientist. That's obviously right. But a geologist would probably be pretty close. Maybe there's some other thing. Maybe some of the fields that they have expertise in, for the people that are here, does actually apply. I'm not a scientist. I don't know what all is involved in these fields. I'm hoping that's the case, but I'm worried it's not.
City of Irvine.
I am Wendell Walton. I'm a Chief Learning Officer for a young startup.
I'm Shelley Lewis. I'm a graduate of West Point, critical thinker, and jumped out of the airplanes.
Okay, so interesting that a credential she lists is a critical thinker. No, you're not. You're a flat earther. No, you're not. Critical thinking is a skill, but like to define yourself like I am a critical thinker, if I don't know, it falls into this thing that I see people criticizing a lot lately of taking this as an attribute and not as an action. It's not you engage in critical thinking or that you're good at it or necessarily. It's I am a critical thinker. So any way I think is critical thinking and good critical thinking. And if you're doing it, if you come to different conclusions, you're doing it badly. I don't know that that's necessarily how she approaches it, but it does smell of that. Graduating West Point is no small feat though. So like good, like congrats. I mean, that's not easy. Doesn't necessarily like qualify her to be here. And it's kind of interesting of like, when they're listing their credentials, that it's not a qualifying thing. The other guy was like a director of learning or something at a startup or something. Like, it's not. It doesn't give you any expertise on this. And jumping out of airplanes, being a critical thinker. I mean, thinking critically would help you here, but like it's not a qualification to say that I am a critical thinker. Certainly, jumping out of airplanes isn't. Neither is graduating from West Point. That gives you expertise, but not on this subject.
My name is Dan Glattman. I work as Dan the Waterman in the drinking water filtration industry, and I'm a truth seeker.
A truth seeker.
My flat earthers on the left and my globe earthers on the right.
So yeah, it's just kind of interesting the non credentials.
I believe the earth was created by a higher power.
This is completely unrelated. What the hell? Why would you start here? You could believe that the earth was created by a higher power and believe that the earth is round, believe that the earth is flat. I mean, maybe because this is middle ground and the goal is to get them to agree. Like, see, we have more in common than we thought, and we'll come to a middle ground and not like a debate show, I guess. But they like clearly set up adversarial ideas against each other at the very least, and like they want the back and forth and the disagreement. If there wasn't disagreement, we wouldn't be here. So it's weird to start here. Like, this would be the kind of thing like you let them bicker at first and then you bring them together with something like this. It's so strange that they start here. Now, of course, the flat earthers are more likely to. A lot of them like it's
Well,
like
I've
their
been a
beliefs are
Christian
like
for 30
seated in
years,
Christianity
so,
or other
the Bible is
religiosity.
a flat earth book.
So the Bible does describe the earth as being flat. However, if you believe the earth is round, that doesn't mean you're not believing in the Bible. You can believe it's metaphorical or poetic or described as in a way that the people in that time would understand. That wouldn't even change whether it's inerrant. If it's poetic, it could still be the inerrant, unchanging word of God and not literally describe the shape of the earth. But people take it this way. That said, like, it's also written by people who didn't know what the hell they were talking about. Like, once you leave the religiosity, it's very easy to be like, okay, so it's wrong. It's wrong about a lot of stuff. It's wrong about whether slavery is cool and good. Sure.
You have to take it literally. Like, for example, in Isaiah, when it talks about how the earth is like a clay wax seal that's stamped with upturned edges.
He said it's like that. You could interpret like that in so many ways. Oh, sorry. The closed captioning are covering up. They actually have the quote here. That's pretty neat. The earth takes shape like clay under a seal, and its features stand out like those of a garment. That second part implies that, like, this might not even necessarily be literal, and the first one, like, okay, I guess that does imply that.
That's just not some fancy story. That's a simile. It is like.
Right, absolutely. And in Isaiah talks about too, and I'm a Christian, he who sits upon the circle of the earth. There's a difference between a circle and a ball.
Well, exactly.
I mean,
if you look at the original Hebrew, it means disc.
Yeah.
There's over 200.
That's the other thing with biblical argument is that translations are a huge issue. The Old Testament was written originally in Hebrew, and as I understand, though this could be mistaken, that ancient Hebrew is not the same as modern Hebrew. It basically was a reborn language. Even if that wasn't the case, certainly implications of meanings changed massively in that time, and also like what vocabulary was available is very, very different now as opposed to then. It gets even more difficult with the New Testament, which was written in Greek, but Jesus would have spoken Aramaic. So at a minimum, there's a translation of like what he said into ancient Greek, which is not the same as modern Greek, in the same way that we said with Hebrew. There's a lot of changes over time that languages experience. And then it's also we're not working from like the original manuscript, right? There are like updates and there are changes and like mistranslations and miscopying and all this stuff over time. But then that gets translated into other languages like English. You lose so much nuance from the translations. A great person to listen talk about this is a Bible scholar named Bart Ehrman. That's where I'm drawing a lot of this from. He's a really, really interesting guy to listen to lectures from, and he talks about a lot of this stuff. He talks about a lot. This is among the things that is like language and translation is a big deal. To be a Bible scholar, he has to know a lot of languages and the ancient versions of them. So he knows ancient Greek and Aramaic and a few other languages. I don't remember all, but like that's what kind of was into it. So like to go, oh, I read it in the book and it's like this, but that's in English in this like modern translation from all these things. Like even if the Bible is like the word of God, you're not necessarily even listening to that word.
Scriptures
reading
in the Bible
it, I
that point
suppose.
to a flat earth.
But there are descriptions of the Earth that lead to in the Bible that lead to a flat Earth like
So
concept.
this
but it
notion
could
that
be
you
metaphor
need
for
God or some higher power to create the earth or the universe is very old,
and also
and
not
was
necessary for either
initially
model.
posited by people of a pre-scientific age.
And I'm actually really, really glad that one of the flat earthers didn't step forward, because it shows you can believe in a flat Earth even if you don't believe in a creator, let alone a Christian God. And I kind of wished one of the scientists stepped forward, not because I was hoping that they'd be religious, but more it would demonstrate that you don't have to, like, you can be religious and believe in a round Earth, and also like you don't have to be an atheist to trust to believe in science.
Since then, we have learned quite a bit about the universe coming into existence, when that happened. Modern humans don't get their cosmology, they don't get their physics, they don't get their knowledge of the universe from the Bible or any ancient
Hell
text.
yeah,
It's sort of like the God of the gaps. Once, people used to believe that lightning was God's wrath,
And this is a pretty good description that's at the bottom here. God of the gaps is a theological perspective in which gaps in scientific knowledge are taken to be evidence or proof of God's existence. It's from Wikipedia, but it's pretty good. Usually it doesn't manifest as explicitly as that. People will say like, but if you ever hear like a "we don't know" in science, okay, if it wasn't God, then you tell me how it happened. That's usually an indication that it's a God of the gaps argument. The argument is only that we don't know, so I'll fill in that gap in our knowledge with God. That's why it's called God of the gaps.
throwing these lightning bolts. But once we understood it was a natural process.
And by the way, you can do the God of the gaps argument with non-religious arguments. People can like, I don't know how it happened, therefore this thing must have been the case. People can do that all the time with like CIA machinations or whatever. You can fill in anything there. It doesn't have to be God, but most frequently it is used for evidence of God, because what other evidence could there possibly be? Like, there just isn't any.
God shrank a little bit more because now we couldn't attribute those lightning bolts
That's true.
to God.
The history of like
attribute that to the real science.
Supernatural
the
explanation has
point
shrunk
about the
over
Bible
time
specifically for
because
me
we've
is
explained things
why is that
scientifically.
one particular text the correct one? You choose to believe that, and that's
So I like this question a lot. Unfortunately, it's going to sound like, I think they might take it like he's asking, why is this religion the correct one and as opposed to another religion? But his actual wording was, why is this text the correct one? That also, I don't know if he intended this, but that also hints at the different translations, the different languages in which it was written, so on and so forth. Like, there are different texts of the Bible. And so, like, why is this reading, this interpretation, the one you cling to? Some of it might be just like it was the one presented to you, and this is where a lot of religiosity tends to be. People, as it turns out, are most frequently the religion of their parents. Wacky that. I wonder if it's not so much that they believe it because it's true, but because they were raised with it. And it's likely the case, in a similar way, that the text they like is the one that they grew up with and they think is the correct one because they grew up with it.
That's fine. But
hey, Kim Gal.
There's so many other writings.
So this isn't really a debate. This is a like middle ground thing. It's supposed to be like bringing the two sides together. But we have scientists versus. I guess the context here is blocking out the title. We have scientists and we have flat earthers. The current question is, do you believe the Earth was created by a higher power, which is completely off
other
topic.
books. So why weren't they correct? Why is just the Bible correct?
Well, what you'll find in a lot of these ancient religions
Oh, he did say
is
the
they're
Bible is
all
correct as a book.
flat Earth religions.
So yeah,
All their-
a lot of ancient people had the same wrong idea. By the way, it's also not true. Not all ancient religions are flat Earth religions. Maybe all the texts that we have a description wherein the Earth is flat, but like there are religions certainly that didn't necessitate that being the shape of the Earth, especially in cultures where they knew. Like, I don't know if there are texts for the ancient Greek pantheon. If there are, I don't know if there are descriptions of the shape of the Earth or whatever. But the ancient Greeks knew the Earth was round, so I don't imagine it would have been a foundational element of their religion. Which also, remember, not all religions are belief based. I gotta keep reminding myself that we're so used to Christianity, which is surrounded with believing the right things, it's easy to forget that not all religions are like that. Even if it's described that way, it doesn't really matter necessarily. Judaism is very much about what you do. Same thing with the ancient Greek pantheon of like it's not so much that you worship them because like you believe they exist. It's like they'll make your life difficult if you don't make them happy. So that's why you do it. It's an interactive engagement as opposed to a engagement of belief.
Their cosmology goes back to being a flat Earth with an enclosed system. So it's not just the Bible that teaches
Also,
this.
there's a lot of good
It's
reason why a lot of
many
ancient
different
understandings would lead
religious.
that way. If you look out your window, that's what the world looks like. It seems like the sky is a dome because you can kind of see the back of the sky, like where the horizon ends, you see like the wall of the sky. So it looks like it's a dome over the top, and it looks flat, but like things are often wrong. Appearances are often inaccurate. That's very obvious to anyone. And like if you go in for that kind of belief, lady, you gotta believe in a lot of really wacky stuff because they also say things like there are the pillars of the earth and like literally underneath the ground is the underworld, and like we've drilled pretty deep. We haven't found one yet.
Books.
So one problem I have is to trying to explain phenomena happen in nature by holy books. Those are religious books. Those are not books of science. And it is wrong to infer or deduct scientific readings out of those books.
By the way, that exact argument I've heard from religious people. This is what I mean about you don't have to like you don't have to take everything in those texts as literal truth to still be a believer. I've heard that exact argument, I think, from a Muslim apologist to say it's an incorrect reading. You're reading a book of religion and reading it like a book on science, and you're simply misreading it in that way. It would be akin to reading a book on poetry that you know is explicitly about a book on poetry and reading that as a description of the literal world. It's not really that. And yeah, religious people often make that argument. You don't have to take anything in the text as literal truth. The creation of the earth is a scientific question. Yeah, completely agree. And religious texts are religious texts, not scientific ones. They might try to describe the world, but like you can even excuse that away as being metaphorical or poetic or whatever else, but they are not sources of scientific understanding, as Ali correctly pointed out.
My name is Wendell.
Oh,
I
that's
am
very little
a
interaction there.
Logical, biblically based, and scientific flat earther.
That is a contradiction of terms multiple times.
I didn't start out, and no one starts out as
What do you
a
think
flat
when
earther.
people say they believe in both scientific
but
and
I had a
religious
lot of
explanations?
questions.
I actually, weirdly, Chemgal, that does make a lot of sense to me. Even when I was really, really young and I was being raised like around people who were religious. Like I don't know. I don't want to say raised religious because I wasn't like press gang to go to go to religious services all the time and like you have to believe this stuff. It was so much as like my family believed in stuff, and so even then there was this like weirdness of like creation versus evolution, and the thing that made sense to me even as a kid was like, well, isn't it possible that like God created the first life and the understanding of the process of evolution and that thereby created the diversity of life that we experience? It's a little bit of a God of the gaps argument, right? Because we just don't know about abiogenesis. Well, I shouldn't say we don't know, but like we don't have a any evidence for like how that happened yet. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. Like we don't have a full understanding of that yet. But the idea is still a combination, like you say, Kemgal, that it is a belief in scientific explanation in that the theory of evolution is demonstrated and real, and okay, no, I don't like. I'm not arguing against that as a concept. But saying like, well, there could be an aspect in which God is related or involved. In the same way, this is why I think deism is often appealing to scientists. And well, I was going to say why it was appealing to me for a while, but my version was very different, and so it was appealing for a different reason. but I think that might be why deism is very appealing to scientists, because it posits a god that created the universe and then walked away, let everything run. This is the god of Einstein. People often talk about Einstein as though he were religious. The god he was talking about, when you see quotes of it, was a god of order, right? The rules that exist throughout the universe, not an intervening personal god, but the idea that the laws that govern the universe are in some way similar to the divine. I won't claim to like understand exactly what he meant by it, but I will say like it was closer to deism than anything. And I do know a decent number of scientists, when they do have religious beliefs, are often deist, because that lines up so well. Of the universe is ordered, and what happens makes sense and can be, and we can make sense of it. And it doesn't seem and it seems at the very least possible that it was set out like, well, the question of where it came from is a difficult one, and it is a little bit of an easy answer to say, well, there was a god that did it. And what form that god takes also varies from person to person, but it makes sense to me. Even in the sense, like, people speculate a lot as to whether our universe is a simulation, or whether we can know that, because technology advances. We're getting to the point where we can simulate, at the very least, very simple universes. You might not think that, but I mean, when you, like, I don't know, when you play a video game or whatever, the universe is contained in that box. It's a very small one, but it's there. It's a simulation of like some kind of universe. And so the idea is like, well, with the proliferation of those, there are far more simulated universes than real ones. Isn't it more likely than not that ours is simulated as well? Whether that's true or not isn't really the point. The point is, well, if it is a simulated universe and it was created in a deistic sense, is not the programmer or whoever was running the program or whatever who created this simulation, is even, or like a scientist or whatever, is not that person, in a deistic sense, the god of our universe, the god that set the rules, got it in, set it in motion, and then stepped away and watched? So while that isn't a supernatural explanation, because we're positing the existence of a very natural individual, a very, like, maybe not a human, but a life form that we can think of, probably developed through evolutionary means in its own universe, so on and so forth. To our eyes, from our perspective, that is a deistic God. So it does make a lot of sense to me, the people who believe in both scientific and religious explanations. I tend not to go in for that, but I am very sympathetic to that mindset. I think it's understandable, and I don't necessarily have issue with it. The issue I take is when people prefer the religious explanation to the scientific one, or reject the scientific explanation, well, for religious reasons or otherwise.
So I actually got to the point where I had to go
It was
out
an interesting question,
and
though.
put my own eyeballs on it. So we went out to an observation at Salton Sea, and things just didn't add up down there. So we've gone back probably a dozen times, and I can guarantee you that there is no curvature over distance.
So this is a thing that I've seen come up before on a YouTube channel that I used to love for doing this stuff, and then they stopped doing it, so I'm not going to plug them or shout them out. But one of the things that you'll notice about a lot of these experiments that flat earthers do is, when they're doing distance experiments, is they're very frequently over water. And while that seems kind of arbitrary, you have to remember, water, like when you have large bodies of water, there's not while it seems like there's a hard line where the water stops and the air begins, it's not exactly like that. There's a lot of vapor and moisture in the air above the surface, and water in the air refracts light and can cause it to curve by refracting the light downward. So yes, across large distances of water, you can see a lot farther because of that light refraction. I mean, obviously, I don't know exactly what his experiments are, but he was pointing out, it was like this large sea or whatever. That could be an issue.
The internet has played an important role in confirming my view of this topic.
This is a lot more reasonable, and of course, like it's going to be all the flat earthers and none of the scientists. And yes,
we have the
Ali, I
advantage of
fucking love you.
information today. That's-
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's part of the problem because people are getting their research from other people who don't know what they're talking about and who are like telling them. This is what I mean when we were watching the previous flat Earth debates. When we were watching like Wits It Gets It, and he was saying like, "Oh yeah, I do my own research," and he was being told, "No, you don't," and it sounds like you're saying like, oh, you're just claiming I'm lying or that I don't do the things that I do. No, we believe that you're doing the things you claim to do. What we're saying is that's not research because what you're doing is very frequently, if you're a flat earther, I mean, you're not conducting good experiments. You're doing things that can seek only to validate your belief and are often full of holes, or your research is finding other flat earthers who said they did a thing but like probably did it wrong or misunderstood something or didn't take something into account, or like browsing on the NASA website to see what they say about certain materials so that you can be like, well, that can't possibly go into space or whatever. It's not research, not in the way scientists do research.
Outside of channels 2, 4, and 7 and the few networks that are corporately owned. It's pretty easy to say YouTube isn't research, but when you spend enough time, you're picking up quite a bit. And with the discussion groups...
Yeah, notice how he says, like, YouTube isn't research. That's exactly what I mean. Watching YouTube videos, it's not research. And while he's paying lip service to that, he goes on to say... But, kind of it is. Like, that's where he's going, right? It's like, well, you spend enough time in this, you do learn stuff, but you're learning from people who are telling you things that are wrong.
We've gone against opposition. We've opposed ourselves. Surprisingly enough, flat Earth is its own worst enemy.
That's not surprising at all,
So
actually.
It's not that easy for us to come to consensus.
And you don't.
And we find the consensus
And
is
it's kind of funny that,
orchestrated.
like, the inability to come to a consensus is like, framed as a positive here when you're talking about what should be a scientific model, a view of the world that you can demonstrate. Shouldn't you have a consensus? Scientific consensus is like kind of an important thing to be able to point to, and it's weird that not having it is being touted as a positive. It's actually a negative. It's a huge problem for you.
And not actually scientific in any way.
You know, my grandfather used to tell me growing up, never believe anything you read in the newspaper, right? He told that to me. Now,
so this is the kind of advice that is often like it's hyperbolized, and that's the problem. There's a lot of stuff in newspapers that isn't true, or is phrased in a specific way to imply a certain meaning, so on and so forth. A very good example I can think of is, there was a protest, and it was like violence began after police like shot a protester or whatever, and it's like, no, it didn't begin after that. It happened when the police shot the protester or did whatever it was. But it's phrased in that way, kind of implying what the police do isn't violence, but what protesters do is. That is a way where you can understand like what you're being told is a little bit not true. And so, yeah, having a healthy skepticism is good, but being overly skeptic where you reject all of it. And in fact, if you take that to an extreme where you say it's not true, therefore something that's different must be true. If the newspaper says the Earth is round, well, it's always lies, so that must mean that the Earth is flat. That's dangerous. A quote I like a lot from Lawrence Krauss is, I like to keep an open mind, but not so open that my brain falls out of my head. So like, yeah, his grandfather saying never trust anything you read in the newspaper. That's a problem, but it's coming from, his grandfather probably had a more, well, I hope his grandfather had a more nuanced view of it, of like, yeah, it's often somewhat untrue and you have to do more than just read the newspaper, but he's telling a child never believe any of it, and that's how it's going to be interpreted, which is not sound advice.
Oh, with the age of
Some
the
of what
internet,
is in newspapers
it's
is
like,
true.
How much of this misinformation are you getting there? And when you have like
I only say
eyewitnesses
some because I don't
taking
know how
video
much.
of
It could be a
something,
lot.
you do
Could be
have
most.
to take everything with a grain of salt. That's why, because of my my multimedia background, I knew that all that stuff could be faked.
Yep.
Take it into Photoshop,
We start with
take it into After
it could
Effects.
be faked. So notice like could be faked isn't the same as it was faked. Also, you have a multimedia background in current year. Maybe you know a lot about stuff in the past. You maybe you've been working in this field for a long time. I don't know, but a lot of the stuff that you're saying like could be faked needs to have been able to be faked from like the 60s. It's not just like, oh, well, we have Photoshop now. They did not have that in the 60s. It's very different. Also, a lot of the evidence that you can that you
This
can
is
derive
at the
has
core
no need
of
for
the issue of
multimedia
why
to demonstrate,
there are so many flat Earth believers out there right now. The problem
and not
is
so much in the scientific
the
community.
information from someone who decides to start a website or produce a YouTube video is not reliable.
Yeah, a reminder: anyone can start a YouTube channel. My dumbass did. Anyone can can make a website. I'm a software engineer. I've done it several times. It's not. There's no like authenticity required for that. That's actually a problem that's common to the internet frequently, but it's also a massive issue for anyone for like the web 3.0 people, like the crypto people, is that the information once it's there can be there, but there's nothing that stops someone from putting bad information there. There's nothing that prevents someone from lying on the internet, right? It's like a common joke. You mean someone will go on the internet and lie? Who would do that? Nah. Like, but obviously people, and they don't have to be lying either. They could just be wrong. They could just have bad ideas that are incorrect. We all do, and eventually, if you say one on the internet, that doesn't make it true.
When I have a toothache, I go to a dentist. When my car breaks down, I go to a mechanic.
Yep.
When you have questions about cosmology, you should go to an astrophysicist, you should go to a physicist, you should go to people who have spent years and years studying these ideas, not some 6-minute YouTube video.
And for what it's worth, like, as much as people might, like, some people might chafe at that a little bit of, like, oh, it's, like, insistence on scientific understanding. We can understand things in other ways. Like, that's true, but, there's a reason that farmers, when there's a drought going on, they don't talk to like someone who will do some magic and make the rains come. They go to a meteorologist, because it works. That's the other, like, science works, and that's a big deal, where these other methods tend not to, especially the stuff that flat earthers do. They tend to lead them in really bad directions. That's something that was really cool to me to learn about in the ancient world. There's a lecturer by the name of Richard Carrier who I think is really interesting. He talks about like biblical stuff as well, but what I found most interesting that he discusses is like science and technology in the ancient world. And one of the things he points out is like ancient Romans had a lot of the same scientific method concepts or like precursors that we use today. It's not that they didn't have them. It's that they had a lot of other bad ideas and they hadn't sorted the good ones out from the bad yet. So there were some Roman scientists like doing what we would probably call science today, that like some of their approaches were really good, of like, okay, you think the kidneys do this, let's like see if we can demonstrate that and disprove it, and like, oh, clearly it doesn't do that. But then they also had a lot of really bad ideas, and I can't think of any offhand, but like, and that's the big issue, is that science as a method endeavors as much as possible to refine and weed out the bad ideas. This is why it updates too. The scientific method isn't identical as to when it began. The basics are, but like the idea of a double-blind study where not only do you have a control group and a placebo group that are being given given pills by the doctor or whatever it is they're testing, but you also have the person administering these things not know what they're getting. So that so both the administrator and the subject are both blind. That's why it's double blind. That's like fairly new. And when I say fairly new, I don't know exactly when it came about, but like at least within the last 100 years. And that's because it adds additional safeguards against ways that you can be wrong about stuff. And that's really cool that science keeps improving on that axis. Whereas like flat earth stuff, it's almost the opposite. Sometimes it feels like they look for more ways for them to be wrong about things.
There is a percentage of people that if they saw a YouTube video that was not within their scientific chops to refute on the face of it,
Yep.
would believe anything out there.
Yeah, that's also
One
a
of the
difficulty
things I
of
will
like
say-
this is why I think, by the way, that flat earthers often refer to try to refer to things the person they're talking to doesn't know about, is that when you don't know about it, they can tell you anything they want about it, and they can make it seem like it proves their case. But unfortunately, like, you just need more information to disprove them. This is why anecdotes are often very appealing to people like this, because you can never really disprove an anecdote. That applies more to like to other kinds of like truthers than flat earthers more. But like this is why they do that. You know, we had to look up some of the stuff that we're talking about. It could be a little compelling of like, oh yeah, why is it the case that whatever the thing is they say? But then you look into it and it's not like that at all. Or they were like misunderstanding or lying to you about what was going on. We saw that when Witsit Gets It was talking about that expedition to Antarctica, where he was saying like they found this and this, is like, oh, none of that's true. Actually, none of that's true, and all you had to do was look into it. But if you don't look into it, and this is why people who tend not to be critical thinkers fall for this kind of stuff all the time, is there's kind of a weeding out process. It's the same thing that happens with scams, is that if you're the kind of person to research and look into this stuff, you're probably not going to get very far. But the people who aren't are going to buy in, and they're going to fall deep into the hole because they're not checking. So one safeguard against conspiracy theory is to check, is to question claims made by people like this, look into stuff, learn about what's going on, and not, when I say learn about what's going on, I don't mean like what flat earthers will say. Well, they say like watch all these flat earth videos. I mean actually go look for verifiable evidence from sources that don't have an ulterior interest in convincing you.
Is NASA.gov has their own documents out there that we get to vet, which is through the Freedom of Information Act. And would you agree that NASA documents, if they're on display, that we should be able to go and research inside there?
NASA is
sometimes. By the way, so I'm not sure. So it seems like the implication of what she's saying is that we can't actually look through some of this data. Whatever documents are made public, yeah, feel free. I think that's great. That's a cool way to learn about like how NASA works and what they do. I think it's a very good thing to go read those documents. If they're not made available, there can be good reasons for that. Some amount of documentation, for example, might be like data from satellites that maybe you shouldn't have access to. Like if if the satellite is over a U.S. military base, even on American soil, that isn't public or on the books or whatever. Like there could be information in there that is important for people not to get their like the location of like nuclear missile sites or whatever. Like I don't know if that's hidden or whatever, but I can understand maybe why that might want to be not shared with the public. There are good reasons for some of this information to not necessarily be made publicly available. If there's like, I don't know, like here's how you make an atom bomb or whatever. I don't imagine NASA would have that, but that's the kind of information of like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't, that shouldn't be public. But the implication is like, oh, it's not public, so what are they trying to hide? Well, they might not be trying to hide anything nefarious necessarily. Or like it might be something nefarious that is completely different. This is what I mean about God of the Gaps. Could be for anything. There's missing information. Therefore, the flat earther says that information must be a cover-up of the flat earth conspiracy, but it could be a million things. It could be the location of military bases in countries where they don't know we're there and it's not legal or something, or it could be nefarious, but not necessarily what you're talking about.
proving that the Earth is flat.
Well, they say in 14 of the documents.
You should read what NASA says, and you should listen to what
I
NASA
would
says.
love to see your NASA evidence that the Earth is
It's
flat.
only their contradictory issues.
Okay.
Yeah, there it is.
Let's-
Yeah, so the scientist made a good point of like, I'd like to see what information that NASA provides that the Earth is flat, because they don't. Instead, what the flat earther means and what they're pretending, this is why they act as though they have the backing of NASA data to lend legitimacy to their claim, but they don't. And as soon as you press even a little, you notice he says it's only their contradictory issues that bring us here. They thought they found discrepancies in NASA data. They assumed that means that NASA's lying about the shape of the Earth specifically and not a million other things that could be happening, and then say that's evidence. And then they work backwards and say it's NASA's evidence. We have evidence from NASA that the Earth is flat, which isn't true at all.
Yes, here.
We're all familiar with the Earthrise photo, right? The Earth is rising over the moon. We're all familiar with it.
it's a
That's
great
NASA.
picture.
You can go out to
It's
NASA's
evocative.
site. You can download the original, right?
I already know what you're going to ask.
Oh, you can
So,
download the original?
you
Oh,
bring
hold
up
on.
the-
I'm taking a note. We're doing that. I have like a bunch of pictures that I have a bunch of pictures that I use as rotating desktop backgrounds. That sounds like a really cool one. taking a note there.
the luminance on it, and you can see where it's cut out and pasted there.
They're showing
So,
us
by the
doctored
way, there are
images that
reasons
are
for
clearly
that
doctored.
have nothing to do with. This is, again, where you need to know everything about everything. And I only know this because I watched other people debunk claims like this. As it turns out, taking a picture of the Earth is very, very difficult. It's quite large. So there's stuff that you have to do to even develop a photo like that will look like it's been manipulated, even though it hasn't. Or, like, even if it has, it's not relevant in the way that it does. So, like, you know, if you have to have a long period of exposure, then the clouds are going to move in that time. So maybe, like, you'll remove the clouds and then put them back in once you've, like, developed, like, that's not necessarily lying to you so much about the shape of the Earth as it is a necessary, like, it's just nothing you can do to get around the difficulty of taking a picture of the Earth, at the very least with technology we currently have. We think often as pictures of just, like, click, and then you have, like, whatever you're seeing that is now on the photo, but it doesn't really work that way. I can't say as I know exactly how it does work, but understanding there's more complexity makes you realize, like, some of the stuff is nonsense. Or I've even seen one of the complaints being like, oh, you can see, like, that they, in this picture of the Earth, if you take it into Photoshop, there's, like, a square border around the Earth. And, like, what's that doing there? Unless they dragged and dropped this picture and, like, it was completely artificial. Except if you take a picture of something you know is spherical, or actually if you just make a circle on Photoshop and then you compress the image and then open it again, it'll have that same thing. It's just, what is it called? JPEG artifacting. There's a lot of this kind of stuff that, like, if you don't know about all of this, the flat earther can take that as an opportunity to run away with the conversation of, like, how could you argue with that? And this is why it becomes very difficult. You have to know so much about so many things, and they will always find something you don't know about to go on at length about, of, like, how it's irrefutable evidence for what they're talking about, even though it isn't.
The blue marble is a very famous image from 1972. When you talk to the artist from NASA, his name is Robert Simmons, he talks about exactly how it was created from data, and it's not a photograph whatsoever.
Yeah, but not being a photograph doesn't mean it's that they're covering up the shape of the Earth, right? According to the flat earther, the artist said that it is based on the data they had. So it's not like, oh yeah, we just made it up. But also, yeah, there can be difficulties in that. And the implication is that, like, they know they're covering up the shape of the Earth, but, like, why? Like, why do that? And then why even release the photos? Just say it's impossible to take a picture of the Earth. But you, sitting in your computer chair, like, debunked all the scientific data, like, all these science, like, again, and, like, of course you have to ask, like, the flat earther, what, you think all these scientists sitting here are all in on it? Because a lot of them, like, some number of them need to know this information for their job. But, you know, and this is where the conspiracy, you know, explodes in population, where suddenly you need millions of people, if not billions, especially over the decades, in on this conspiracy. For what? To what end? Why?
He added
what?
clouds.
Let me explain.
He added
Hold
a
on.
highlight of the
If you
sun.
take-
Let's see
you know,
what
on your
what this thing is. I like having the captions on, just in case I miss something, I can read it back, but I know they get in the way. So with 4 months of satellite data, so satellite data, not just like I made it up, we wrapped the flat map around a ball, integrating the surface, clouds, and oceans to mathematical expectations of how the Earth looks from space. Okay. Remember, the implication from the flat earther is, like, this is intended to deceive, but this rendering wasn't created with the intention of demonstrating the shape of the Earth. This was not a question. That's not something that is being discussed. The flat Earth movement is very ancient and very new, and not anywhere in between. There weren't flat earthers demanding evidence then. So yeah, the only point is to make something that looks right to people, like, so they can be awed by how cool it is to see the Earth from space. And you would think, I would think the physics calculations for launching rockets would all be different. Oh yeah, well, flat earthers frequently don't believe that we can put things into orbit, or that we can't, like, that rockets actually go to the moon or whatever. Like, which makes things really weird. Of, like, do they think there are no satellites? In which case, what is all the satellite budget? Like, how are we doing a lot of the things that we need satellites for? And this is, again, where, like, suddenly suddenly it's not just NASA's in on it, not just the people we are talking about, but now also anyone who works with satellites, anyone who works with satellite data, anyone who works in GPS, anyone who, they have to reject so much of reality that it gets to the point where probably more people than not have to be in on the conspiracy for it to even start making sense. But at that point, what's it for? And remember too, I don't know about most, a lot of flat earthers chalk up, like, when asked, like, okay, well, now you have a problem, you have a conspiracy, who is doing it and why? The who, big shocker, is Jews. So now on top of like all the people that have to be involved with that, it also has to be basically every Jew on the planet. It also has to be like every politician who isn't Jewish that they don't like, they say is Jewish, and add to that. Like, this is why I'm not exaggerating when I say literal millions, if not billions of people, certainly tens of millions of people have to be in on this conspiracy for no discernible reason.
Most phones have that panoramic image. When you do that, you're taking a series of pictures, and the phone cleverly stitches that
just
together.
saying how it's presented. It's presented as a real photograph.
And notice that he's completely missing on why this is being mentioned. He's like, it's being presented as a real photograph. Yeah, it's being presented as a photograph, partially because, like, I guess what the scientists are trying to say is that it kind of is, but also it's being presented as one because the people, when they were presenting it, they weren't trying to prove the shape of the Earth. This movement is not like the flat Earth movement in the modern time doesn't go, like, is less than 20 years old or something like that. There's no reason in the 70s for NASA to like cater to. They're not trying to prove the shape of the Earth. They're just trying to show what the Earth would look like from space, or like approximate what it looks like, even though we can't like really take a good picture of it in the way that you think we can. And the scientists trying to explain, like, there are composite images that we consider photographs that you basically can't do otherwise. A panoramic photo is a great example. You're not taking one very wide photo, you're taking a lot of little photos and they get stitched together. It's a composite image in the same way. Shouldn't that like assuage your worries about this? But he's not even listening.
NASA takes real photos and they either clean them up for color or they stitch them together so it's one large image. It doesn't mean they're CGI.
You're talking
And it
about
doesn't
composite.
mean, even if they were, it doesn't mean that they're covering up the shape of the Earth. They could be covering up a million things. You know, I could argue that instead NASA is covering up that our Earth is surrounded at all times by alien spacecraft that you could see from space but not from the Earth. And I could use these images that are touched up exactly the same way to demonstrate something completely different. This is how you know it's not evidence as well, is that you can use it to demonstrate mutually incompatible things. You know, I could say, oh, they're trying to cover up that the Earth is actually donut shaped. There's no contradiction there. So maybe it's not evidence for any of them.
I'm what you call a globe denier.
We know. I thought Dan was one of the scientists when I said I was on board for him because he wanted to destroy these people. I thought he was, but he wasn't. So I take it back. I don't like this guy.
You could even get me into a virtual construct if I can't find the borders myself.
What? Wait, what?
If I can't find
what is it?
You could even get me into a virtual construct if I can't find the borders myself.
What does that even mean?
It appears to me to be a stationary plane, as opposed to the vastness of infinity of space. I would find it to be an ice plane where we have a localized sun and our environment thrives there. You know, these particular people.
Also, the infinity of space is a weird claim, given that, one, some flat earthers claim that the Earth is infinite. Two, some flat earthers still think that the universe is infinite. And three, scientists do not say that the universe is infinite. As I understand, the current best understanding of the universe is that it is massive, but not necessarily, and growing, but not necessarily infinite in a spatial extent. It could be, but it doesn't have to be.
Have misled us on television. This is a brilliant opportunity to speak. We've been suppressed, censored by mainstream media, alternative media.
the go-to of the conspiracist. My wrong ideas are being suppressed and what was it, censored by mainstream media. No, they just tell you you're wrong, dude. Or sometimes you get banned from platforms because you're doing demonstrable harm to the world. Especially as a flat earther, remember, a lot of them think that that Jewish people are behind the conspiracy. If this guy's spreading anti-Semitism, yeah, spreading hate is pretty bad, and getting removed from a platform is pretty reasonable on that basis. It's not censorship. You can still talk, but you have no right to someone else's platform. Now, we can talk about maybe because the internet is a uniquely powerful tool that maybe there should be like a guaranteed amount of access and the access of free rights, but that would be through like a government website, like a hosted website, not through a private one. That makes no sense. I would be open to the idea of like, okay, here's a government site where like you can say whatever the hell you want. But obviously if it's illegal, like if you're inciting people to violence or you're making threats or so on, or you're harassing people, that would be punishable by law as opposed to merely terms of service kind of stuff. But that would be treated as like the real world where you have the freedom of speech. You can speak however you like, as long as you're not literally hurting people by doing so, like, for example, harassing them, threatening them, so on and so, inciting violence, so on and so forth.
Media is just a thing of beauty for me.
Oh, I didn't notice what you said, Kemgal. To be fair, I doubt they mean every Jew. It depends on who you talk to. I'll be real. It depends on who you talk to. Some do, some don't. None of it makes sense. So like, while it might be more reasonable to say, oh, only some Jews are in on it, they call it like a very Jewish conspiracy. It's like, if individual Jews are not necessarily directly responsible, they're like contributing to it, or like, they like are the base of support for like the Jewish cabal or whatever. Like, none of it makes sense. They just the reason why this came about is not because there's any good reason why Jewish people should be at the head of the conspiracy. There's nothing that they can demonstrate as the reason why it would be the case. It's just they already hate Jews. There's already a through line of anti-Semitism, Jewish questioners, there's a lot of that in these kinds of circles. So they just already hate Jews. So they're like, yeah, it's the Jews doing it. And some might think all of them, yeah. Probably not most flat earthers think every Jew is in on the conspiracy. I would assume that a lot of them don't. But I'm guessing a lot of them do also. And this comes out, in fact, not the last debate we watched, but the one before that with the truly exceptional debater for the Globe Earth side, Malachi, I think his name was, against Witsit Gets It, Witsit was hinting at the Jewish conspiracy stuff. And then the subsequent Flat Earth video, the most recent Flat Earth debate we watched, the guy was just doing his whole like conspiracy video, and there was all sorts of like Jewish stuff all over the place. Like he put a Star of David over the eye on the back of a dollar bill. Like, we know why he's doing it. They just already hate Jews and like think and like believe in Jewish conspiracy stuff. So why not staple this to it as well? This is why again, searching for a flat Earth, or in search of a flat Earth. I forget. I've plugged this video 1,000 times on this channel. It's from a creator called Folding Ideas. Go watch it. It's amazing. But like, this is why, as he points out in there, flat Earth got rolled into QAnon so easily, because QAnon is also a Jewish conspiracy theory, which is also why Nazis like it. Like, there's a lot of this that rolls together because they don't care about the shape of the Earth. That's like almost the least. It's close to the least relevant thing a flat earther believes. Weirdly enough, what they really believe in is what a flat Earth being real would demonstrate about the world. It would demonstrate there is this cabal that we should hate, and they're trying to oppress us, and it's the Jews, and like, that's what they're actually after. Flat Earth is just the way they get there. And now, while some number of believers, like flat earthers, will start with the flat Earth belief and then get to the conspiracism, or maybe even not get there, the movement is there for the conspiracy. This is how a lot of conspiracism works, by the way. It's like, it's not about the thing, or it stops being about the thing. It's it becomes about the conspiracy. This is why the last debate we watched, the first speaker, the guy who wasn't Witsit Gets It, who spent all of their time on his opening, had almost his entire opening about the conspiracy and not about whether the shape of the Earth, not about the shape of the Earth, because that's what's important to him.
I view the other side as uneducated.
Oh, I'm sure we're all gonna get yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that the scientists. Yeah, wait, the scientists don't think the others are uneducated? I guess it depends on what you mean by uneducated. I mean, obviously, we don't know about the other two, but the lady was. I mean, she graduated from West Point. You get an education there, but obviously they're. I guess maybe now that I think about it, maybe I wouldn't say they're uneducated. I would say they're miseducated. They are misinformed, not uninformed, which is, I guess, different. They often go hand in hand, but like, I guess some amount of what the flat earthers have already said is aware of the evidence against their position. They just wave it away. So I guess it's not that they don't know, it's that they choose not to believe it, and they choose instead to believe the things that are wrong. Okay, I guess I kind of see where they're coming from, but I would have expected at least one of the scientists to come up, if not all of them. I'm really surprised none of them did. Though obviously the flat earthers have to say the scientists are uneducated. A wild concept if there was one. Can you imagine the audacity and the arrogance you would have to be some internet sleuth and be like, yeah, I'm educated because I watch flat earth YouTube videos, and the scientists whose literal job it is to know this stuff and who have advanced degrees on the subject are uneducated. Holy shit, that's overwhelming.
They certainly think they're educated.
I guess Dunning-Kruger is powerful.
Quite a bit of the university system.
It's not even Dunning-Kruger,
scientism.
Right, scientism.
Oh, okay, scientism. This is another just another nonsense term of conspiracists, religious people. A lot of people will go to scientism when science is opposed to the thing they believe. And what scientism is, according to them, is the belief in science in the way that religious people are claimed to believe in it, which is funny because often religious people are the ones saying it. So it's like, wait, so you get that religious believing is bad, but you're also religious? Okay, whatever. But it's basically that you believe uncritically what scientists say and what science comes up with, and the dogma of scientific claims, as though scientists merely declare and decree a thing as true in the way the Pope does. And it is a criticism on that axis, but that's obviously not what's happening. It's just a coping mechanism, right? They have to say that because if they didn't, they would have to explain why these scientists and the people who know what they're talking about don't agree with them, and that only people that no person who knows what they're talking about and who is educated on the subject ever agrees with them. It's something they have to believe. Again, the flat earth and conspiracism is very frequently a series of things you have to believe because the one thing you're trying to hold to is contingent on all of it.
The belief,
and you have to reshape the world.
What's written, where we tend to be exploring
in order for you to believe
in the
what you
field
believe.
With physical properties, not theories of any kind.
Oh, another aspect of scientism, accused element, is the rejection of the supernatural a priori before assume already there's no supernatural. There's an aspect to that is correct in the sense that science operates with methodological naturalism. I shouldn't say we, I'm not a scientist. Scientists do not scientists kind of assume that supernatural things will not confound their information, because how else could they do their job? Now you could think of that as a paradigmatic problem of, well, you're rejecting the possibility of the supernatural, therefore you can never find it. But the problem is, if you don't start with methodological naturalism, what can happen to you is that you can have any result from any study or experiment and be unable to make any claim about what it means, because for all you know, God messed with your numbers. Like, for all you know, there were little devils on everyone's shoulders that were telling them to say something completely different. And in fact, the world is the opposite of the way it was. And like, how do you proceed from there? This is why, like, it's kind of necessary, and like why, yeah, you end up never acknowledging a possibility of the supernatural. I happen to think that possibility isn't real, but obviously you couldn't scientifically demonstrate that. And but like, every method is going to have assumptions. The thing is that you can look to in science that justifies these assumptions is that it works, and you understand that it's often necessary. Maybe it is the case, right? Like, I couldn't demonstrate otherwise, but maybe it is the case that literally everyone has a little supernatural being that's on their shoulder, and like when a scientific experiment happens, they're like actually tugging the strings, and that's why we get the results we have. But if they weren't there, it wouldn't work this way. But what do we do with that? How can you proceed? How can you know anything about the world if you think that's possible? And so, since we want to know things about the world, scientists are comfortable with the methodological naturalism, and it works. The scientific method, the derivations thereof, they work. So as long as they work, it can be improved, certainly. But there's, like, it's weird to take issue with, like, oh, there's a fundamental flaw. There's weird to say there's a fundamental flaw in the process.
We're using actual measurements that are calculated not by our guidelines, but the guidelines of science as we know it. I can only hope they're uneducated as a...
By the way, that's also not true. It's not science as we know it. Ancient peoples knew that the Earth was round, and they used ancient methods, not scientific ones. In fact, the ancient Greeks figured out that the Earth was round, and the scientific method wouldn't be invented for several hundred years afterwards in another part of the world, in the Middle East. They had a lot of the precursors to it, but it wasn't codified yet. There was no such thing as the scientific method yet. And yet they could figure this stuff out. So no, it's not like a necessity of the modern scientific method at all.
Opposed to disingenuous.
Well, that's the other thing too.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's like the other part of the cope is like, it's either, like, notice he was saying he's hoping they're uneducated because the alternative is that they're lying. Disingenuous, right? Basically implying, not literally saying they're lying, but it's very close. Why? But completely nixing the possibility that he could be wrong. Now, I understand that we believe things, and that when you believe something, you don't think you're wrong, right? That's what it means to believe a thing. But it also means, like, there is an amount to which you should be open to the possibility that you can be wrong about stuff. I don't mean you should go into an argument being like, well, I'm probably wrong. But when you talk to people, especially if on a contentious issue, you should entertain that idea. Like, what would me being wrong look like? It can help you solidify your ideas. This is actually why I sometimes have difficulty in some kinds of arguments. Usually, I mean, obviously I haven't had them on stream, but so it would be in my personal life. But sometimes one of the issues is that someone will say something that, while I think might be a bad argument or something, I'm like, oh, hold on, like, that does lead me towards some challenge that could exist on mine, or like, maybe I have to learn more about this, or I don't have a good reason to, like, reject that right this second. And so maybe it could be like, maybe I might not be fully correct on this, or maybe, like, this is how I would find out that I'm wrong or whatever. But of course the other person isn't doing that, and so it's kind of like, I have less backing on my side than they do, not because they're more correct, but because I'm open to the possibility that I'm wrong. I'm not always like this. I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to claim that I am, but I think it's a good thing to do when you can. And of course it should vary. The amount to which you should leave yourself open to the possibility you're wrong should depend on what the thing is. If someone tried to argue with me that the sun doesn't rise in the east, I'm gonna be I'm not gonna be very open to the possibility that I'm wrong about it. But if there's something that I'm less certain about, like the million things that I say, oh, I don't know for sure, feel free to correct me or whatever. I'm open to listening and I'm open to learning more about it. Though I might not take it from the person who tells me I'm wrong that I am necessarily. I might need to do more looking into it to find that out. And I think that's good. But of course, you can't do that as a flat earther, right? Entertaining the possibility that you're wrong would lead very, very quickly to finding out that you are.
Know that it was on a large scale, the government has been disingenuous.
Yeah, he knows that.
And
He doesn't know that.
They're pushing a narrative, right? So it's hard for
He
us.
couldn't
I mean, I'm sure
possibly
that you've met
demonstrate
people
that. We've
too.
seen
It's
this
like, look,
before.
are you you haven't looked into it yet, or are you a shill?
Incidentally, something noteworthy about this is that the reason they know that the government know in giant finger quotes that the government has covered stuff up is because that would have to be the case because they know that the Earth is flat and like the government and like NASA it demonstrates otherwise. So like that must be the case. Except now it's being used retroactively to be like, well, that's also now evidence that the Earth is flat because we know they're covering stuff up. This is the circularity that I pointed out before of their argumentation of like the thing they derive is from that must be the case for their original belief to be true is then used as evidence for that original belief. Conspiracists do this all the time. I'm curious what Jubilee says a shill is. A shill is someone who pretends to be a supporter but is really undermining from within. Yeah, and there's an implication that a shill is also being paid to do that. It's not merely that they're intentionally undermining it. It's very frequently they're being encouraged to do so for some monetary or material reward.
Are you part of a disinformation campaign?
I don't think you guys are uneducated. I think you're wrongly
Oh, I love this guy. James, I love you, man. It was literally the first thing I said. Yeah, great. Yeah. And what's nice about that too is it does make it just like from an optics perspective, it makes the scientists come off as more charitable. It's not that you're like dumb or stupid or whatever. It's that what you've been told is incorrect. It makes them seem like makes them seem a lot less harsh, which is nice. When at the end of the day, this is a content product that is being shown to an audience, and you really don't want more people falling into flat Earth, right?
I think the problem with what I've seen in the flat Earth crowd is that it's not that they're undereducated, but they, instead of looking at evidence and letting the evidence guide to where the ultimate conclusion is, they start with a conclusion.
Yep.
And then they try to cherry pick evidence to support their pre-drawn conclusion.
Yep, and we saw them doing this already with some of the stuff they were talking about. But yeah, this is also like, this is an aspect of conspiracism as well. There's a lot of, we start with the conclusion, we find the evidence, and then we assume it can only prove that. A great example is when they were talking about like the NASA stuff of like, we assume there's a cover-up, therefore NASA's in on it, therefore this image from the 70s of the Earth was intended to deceive us. That's not why it's there, right? You didn't start from the evidence that it was intended to deceive and draw the conclusion. It was, we're trying to prove this. This is a challenge to it. Let's make that, let's make that evidence of the cover-up or whatever. But it wasn't ever intended to be that. And like, there was no reason for them to do that in that way. There wasn't really a flat Earth movement. And this happens just all the time. There's a great another. Oh, who was it? I think it was Innuendo Studio. It might have been Folding Ideas. I forget. Another creator with has a great analogy for this of like, when you make an argument, it's kind of like building a table where you have the legs and you have the top and whatever. And like with a conspiracist is they'll argue like, of course it has legs because it's a table and a table has legs, but all you're looking at is a plank of wood. And that's the thing they're trying to get to, and they'll make up the things that support it.
Away all the bits of evidence that actually is contrary to their belief system.
I think that you're very well educated as well as you are, Jim.
That's weird. Oh, God, I love these scientists. Like, immediately, like, well, that's weird considering you steps up saying we're educated, you piece of shit. Yeah.
Golly, he's probably got the best education of
yeah,
all.
Oh, never mind. That's not what he was saying. Okay, well, I like that he's going to bat for, like, yeah, we're all scientists and we're educated as shit. And it seems like Ollie is like if that's the praise he's getting, he's probably got like an extra degree or two on top of them, or kind of thing. But yeah, it's kind of wild. There's like, I think you're both really educated, but I did agree that you're uneducated. Like, no, you don't. Stop lying.
Exactly, and he paid for it too.
What?
But more and more professionals are coming on board. They're starting to question their
Professionals?
reality. So the thing of it
But
is,
hold on. So first of all, this is a completely like meaningless statement. More and more professionals are coming on board. What does that mean? It means more people are agreeing with you. So there are more flat earthers. That's the thing. There are more flat earthers. But he's pretending. Like, first of all, we can't demonstrate that in any way. Well, maybe we could, but he's not going to try to. But also, what does being a professional have to do with legitimacy? They're not scientists. Anyone's a professional. Like, this guy's or maybe this guy's a bad example. Like, if someone's a lawyer, they're a professional. They're a professional lawyer. But the fact that they believe a wrong thing doesn't mean anything.
is once you start to really take a hard look at the evidence, and you
not scientists that are
unafraid of
professional.
just standing for the truth, wherever that may lead you.
As if the scientists
then,
aren't. Again, it's like through implication, like only we're doing that, but of course they're not. They're actively not doing that. The scientists are facing that hard truth. In fact, scientists have to do this a lot. That's something I've heard people talk about, mostly Lawrence Krauss, of like, part of being a scientist is being wrong 1,000 times before you're right once. And that way you're right once, it might be like the smallest thing, and then you're going to be wrong 1,000 more times. Because that's just kind of how it is. You have hypotheses, you test them, and you're like, shit, that wasn't right. And then you adjust your beliefs. You don't maintain that belief despite the evidence. In fact, you do the exact opposite. That's what it is to be a scientist.
People end up becoming flat earthers.
So little discussion, right? Compared to the last video, certainly there's just much less in the discussion portion, which is kind of I don't love that as much with a couple of these questions being ones where, like, of course the flat earthers are going to step up, and of course the scientists aren't, or maybe not of course, but like that ends up being the case. It's just like weird. You don't have more pushback of like, no, the scientists are definitely very well educated, and they just like skipped most of that conversation. It's so weird.
I'm hoping to be able to tell our
Yeah, of
side of the
course.
story
Yeah,
from
of
the
course.
inside out. So many
I
times,
mean, you're also not doing that, but
flat earthers are depicted from the outside in, and I want to be able to share with others
For what it's worth, if you
empirical
watch
data
flat earthers describe
that
themselves,
proves
it's
the
kind of
Earth
hilarious.
is
too.
not what we've been told.
Yeah, and notice she's not interested in like demonstrating the shape of the Earth or like convincing people. She's here and like telling our story. Like, we're so martyred, no one even listens to us. We're always downcast and downtrodden again, because it's trying to convince you without talking about the facts of the matter. You become sympathetic because they're like, they have this victim story, the sob story. Oh, we're being censored, so on and so forth, and you become more. I'm blanking on the word here. You become more sympathetic to their position, but they're still wrong. They're trying to convince you on an emotional level about something completely unrelated to try to and then like that draws you into believing the thing that's wrong. I don't think she's doing intentionally. I don't think she doesn't strike me as the kind of person that would be like so calculating and manipulative in that way. But it's the consequence of doing what she's doing, and it's kind of telling that that's what she's trying to do, as opposed to trying to get out of the conversation like, oh, like, let's get more information from scientists, or like try to show scientists how we view the world in a way where like they can hear it directly from us, or show people that the truth of the flat earth belief. It's none of that. It's to like tell our story, because it's about them and it's not about their beliefs.
In my mind, at some point,
Oh, all of the flat earthers. No one's raised a flat earther. Yeah, and of course, yeah. It's so weird. Again, like
So
another
when I
question
was
where like
12 years
obviously
old,
they're all going
I
to
went to space camp,
say
and I met
yes.
Alan B. Shepard.
Oh, nice.
Yep,
I don't know
and I wanted to be an
who that is. I
astronaut,
assume
and I
he's
wanted to be
an
the first
astronaut.
woman to walk the moon.
Oh.
So, for me, I'm a glober. I went into this completely.
Maybe that's why she went
wanting
to
it
West
be-
Point, and that's too bad that she couldn't fall. Like, I don't know if that's why she went to West Point, but like that's the kind of thing you would do. If you're trying to be an astronaut, I think, right? Doesn't that help with that? Like she jumps for airplanes and stuff. It seems like that interest still like existed in her life for quite a while. It's too bad she didn't get to do that. I know it's really hard to be an astronaut. Not everyone gets to do that. We don't even really go to the moon anymore. So like there was a long shot on that part, but also in addition to everything, in addition to like her getting to like live her dream, which isn't that nice when that gets to happen. Maybe she wouldn't be a flat earther. That's not the reason why it's sad that she didn't do this, but like as a note on that, if she had gone to the moon, she would have seen the round Earth and been like, all right, well, obviously,
True. And my husband told me, he saw this
Oh
thing about the
no,
fake moon
yeah,
landing.
that's Alpha
And I was
Lewin.
like, you're absolutely crazy.
And you were
There's
right.
no way that the moon landings are fake.
Yep.
And then in 2010, my husband was killed.
One of my favorite conspiracy like compromise positions is that yes, the moon landing was fake, and it was directed by Stanley Kubrick, like everyone thought. But he was such a perfectionist, he demanded to shoot on site. I love it. It's so great to me because like it's.
And so I never really developed that until
Oh,
around.
your husband was killed. That really sucks. Yeah, I'm really sorry that happened.
2014 when Flat Earth kind of came back up. And that little voice inside my head said, remember the fake moon landings? Remember when that was brought to my attention?
Yeah, that's also
And then
a
I
thing,
started
like,
really critically
bereavement does a lot of stuff
analyzing
to
that.
people.
And I would say, just looking at that evidence, if they can lie about the moon landings,
And
they
they
can
didn't.
certainly lie about pictures and satellites
Yeah, they
and
could.
other
Does that mean
things.
they
And
are
so
doing it?
I started going down that rabbit hole of studying. So that was
Like, by the way, like, like, even if they can cover that up, like I said, does that mean that they did do it? She might not have taken it to mean that yes, they definitely did cover up something else, and it's this, but like that question. This is why no, you're not a critical thinker. She didn't ask the question. Maybe she did at the time, but she's not saying like, okay, but does that necessarily mean that this is the thing that was being covered up? Even if you believe there's capable of cover-ups, or even if you think the moon landing was fake and that that NASA's capable of cover-ups like this, does that mean they did do another one? Oh my god, I forget where it was from, but someone was saying like if NASA was willing to fake great accomplishments like the moon landing, you think they would have had a second one by now, which is choice. Like they could have said we went to Mars. Fuck it. Like if you're labeled to lie on that scale, you can lie about anything. But it's also, even if they could lie on that scale, and even if they did lie on that scale, the scale of flat Earth lies is way beyond that. They couldn't lie on the scale they would have to for flat Earth to be for flat earthers to be right about what they believe.
my influence from
How
my
many
husband.
lies does it take to make a liar, right?
And being ridiculed for being inquisitive.
Well,
is
you're not really
pretty
being
tough on us.
inquisitive.
I wouldn't say that I've changed my mind because my mind isn't set. NASA
Well,
is
I mean, you're here as a flat earther. Like you can say your mind isn't set, but you're arguing against scientists about scientific facts of the world. Yes, it is, my dude. Like maybe you can change your mind, and that's what you mean about it not being set. And like I hope you do. But as far as anyone is concerned, as far as how it expresses outwards, yes, your mind is set.
solely designed to change my mind. It is from its inception, from its
no, it's-
discovery.
what? No,
has
it's
been a
not.
television program. It's been a space program to sell us on something that they've yet to
Like
actually
notice
show us.
the assumption, like in order for this is again the like circular, the like the conclusion proves the premise. They only really think that this conspiracy, or they only really think that NASA is covering up the shape of the Earth because it would have to be in on it. NASA would have to be in on the conspiracy if they're right about the flat Earth. And so, what did he just say? Like, it's been a space program to sell us on this. Now it's evidence that they're right because, look, this program exists to cover this up. But they only think that because they already believe. Again, it's circular. Like, one proves the other.
Show me a globe.
Or one is used to
spinning
prove the
with
other.
Clouds and a moon. Show me home.
So, notice what he just asked. The insane difficulty of that picture probably makes it impossible with current technology. The Earth spinning, first of all, can't do that with a picture. can't you actually can't take a picture of motion, or like you can't like you can't see that the Earth is spinning in one snapshot. That's just not possible. Try it. Spin a top. See if you can notice that it's in motion. How do we know it isn't just like held there? You know. I guess you can see the blur, but the Earth moves way too slow for that to be a thing. But also with the moon, which means you couldn't take it from the moon. You'd have to take it from a satellite that is facing both the Earth and the moon, which, like, how the hell do you get both of those in a frame? Like, they're so far away, and satellites can't be, like, have to be in Earth orbit. They can't be, like, out in a spot where it can capture both and it's that far away. Like, how would you ever do that? And with clouds is an extra problem. You don't just take a snapshot. The clouds are moving and stuff. They get in the way. Like, if you try to take a picture of the Earth with clouds in it, you might only see clouds. It might not be recognizing the Earth. I don't know exactly how it works, so I don't know exactly what it would look like. But, like, the impossibility of what he's asking for, and now, oh, you can't do it, that means I'm right. Or maybe what you asked for was impossible. This is in a similar way to how, like, Kent Hovind and creationist types will say, show me evidence that like a dog can come from a non-dog. Evolution says that's like the theory of evolution would say that's impossible. You can never outgrow your ancestry. Only dogs will ever descend from dogs. Now, they might be things that dogs aren't, but they will never be without the ancestral, like, dogness, I guess. I don't know. Like, that's always going to be descendant from them. So, like, it's just asking for something impossible, and then when it can't be provided, oh, well, I guess that's proof. Well, there are other ways of proving things, and that's what you're asking for. It's just not possible.
And I think I could shut up quite.
And I wish you
easily.
would.
I think I could shut up.
I wonder
The
if
timing
one of them
of
will.
your conversions is interesting to me. 20 years ago,
That's true.
the flat Earth world was tiny
Yep.
and insignificant.
It's very, very new.
Enter the
It exploded. Oh, as he's about to say, it exploded because, like, it was, like, it kind of lined up with a time on YouTube where the right people were making the right content, and the algorithm was the algorithm is frequently designed. It's not nefarious. It's just designed to give you more of what you already seem to like. And so, well, you start watching flat Earth videos, it's going to show you more and more, and it grew a lot. It's shrunk since then, but yeah, 20 years ago it didn't really exist, and it's mostly because of the online age where it's possible for these people to, like, to convince other through dubious means that it took off.
advent of the internet, YouTube, online
Yeah,
discussion
notice how none of
groups,
these people were flat
all
earthers 40 years
these
ago.
new available places where you could find information.
No, they're not
about everything.
exceptionally old,
This
so
is
it's not like,
true
you know,
that-
they probably weren't adults 40 years ago, but like even 30 years ago, they were probably children to teenagers at that time. They don't strike me as, like, being, like, in their 60s or anything. Maybe Dan or something, but, you know, they weren't flat earthers then. Suddenly, in this age where, like, flat Earth is becoming popular, now they're convinced. Not because of evidence, but because people have convinced them. It's a conversation about convincingness. You know, remember with the Daniel Hakikachi video. It's about what is compelling, not what is true.
Evidence, as you looked, were not robust evidence. And the sources you used, they were not reliable sources again. But my problem is that, and I like you guys that you are very skeptical, but at the same time, you are not skeptical about your belief system.
You
That
keep
should
going
have come
back.
first.
You think that that's my foundation for why I believe the Earth is flat, and I'm telling you, you're wrong. I have evidence that proves it's flat.
What type
proves
of
it's
evidence?
not a ball.
What type
Curvature, I
of
just-
We're being misled. We're being deliberately.
Notice what type of evidence that we're being misled, but you only think we're being misled because you already believe the thing. That's not, you can't prove that we're being misled without assuming that the Earth is already flat, and that's your evidence that the Earth is flat. This is what I mean.
Misled by mainstream.
I'm gonna try not to talk
media.
about it every time a flat Earth conversation happens, but they do it so much. I can't help but notice it.
Evidence, you're
We see
thinking.
too far. We see too far. We should
We
not
don't,
be able to
actually.
see. I live in Dana Point.
Okay,
I can see San Clemente Island, which is 60 miles away.
Over water. Over
So
water.
what?
Oh, I'm
It's
on the
11
beach.
First of all, okay, even look at this picture. Like, you can see it barely, right? You can, so, like, the island isn't flat. It's not like it's not, 2 inches thick. it has height to it depending on how high the elevation goes. You're not seeing the shoreline. You're seeing something higher up over water where light can refract across. Like, let me take a look. Okay. About 1950 feet is the highest elevation on San Clemente. Do you think that has an impact on what you can see? If something's taller and you can see the top of it? Yeah, it seems like it. And like in this picture, I can't even make out where the island is. I believe that you can see it, but like you're only seeing maybe the top of it. You're not seeing all of it, and there's this water. Like this, like you'd have to know about some of the specifics. The scientist, like Ali, can't see this picture, right? So he isn't necessarily able to interact with this. It's effectively anecdotal, but obviously she's misunderstanding what she's looking at.
100 feet
I'm on the
tall.
beach.
What do you mean by so what?
Oh, he knows. Oh my God, one of them, I didn't catch who said it, but one of them knows. It's 1,100 feet tall. It was 2,000 feet tall. Maybe I misread that. Maybe it said 2,000. No, yeah, it's closer to 2,000 feet tall as opposed to. Wait, what he said? 1,100. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Never mind. His estimate is smaller. Yeah.
On the beach.
Yeah.
Can you see a ship which is going?
We're
Oh
not
yeah,
talking
let's talk
that.
about the ship that goes
Yes.
over
Okay,
the
I'm glad
curvature
we're
of the
actually getting
Earth.
some
I love
like
it.
back and forth
So,
now, some actual
Science
argumentation.
has said that when I see a ship go out of my field of view, it's going over the curvature of the Earth, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
But then I bring my P900 up, and guess what? I can zoom it back in.
Not
So
all
is
of
it
it.
going?
So she's lying. She cannot bring it back in. She can see more of it, but she won't be able to see the bottom of it anymore. It doesn't when you zoom in, if something's over the horizon, it doesn't appear like it does this. You just see it bigger. But like the same amount of it is blocked.
Going over the curvature of the Earth or
can't.
not?
Absolutely.
Oh, not all the
No, you
time?
can't.
Not all the time?
No, you don't see all the ship. The bottom part of the ship
Hey,
is hidden.
nailing
by
it.
the
At that
curvature.
distance, you shouldn't see the top
At
of it
all.
either.
If the
Well,
Earth were
again,
truly
water.
flat, there would be really hardly any limit. You would be able to stand at the top of the Empire State Building and look towards Chicago, a mere
Yes.
1,000 miles away, and see the lights of Chicago. at
Correct.
night.
No,
And they have to
well,
answer
because
for
you have
that.
an atmospheric disturbance.
Very thick.
I've been
Water
into
alone.
astronomy since I was 10.
It's faulty logic. It's completely faulty logic.
Well,
Okay.
wait, they're stopping it? Let them get into it. That's what we're here. Okay.
One of the big
All right,
things I
Jubilee,
do is
come on.
investigate extraordinary claims like
Oh,
flat
if this is what he's about, then I'm glad he's here. All right. I
ESP,
take back what I said
or
about
all
maybe not
sorts of
having the
different
right
things.
scientist for this.
The Earth is undoubtedly a globe and not flat. This is.
I'm actually a little surprised, given some of their credentials, that we don't have links to some of that stuff. I don't remember what James' credentials were, but with Ali, like, first of all, put like, I don't know, like Dr. Ali, whatever his last name is. Like, I don't know, maybe he doesn't want to be that. Like, I don't know, these are links to these people. But he said who he was. He said he was director of something in Irvine. I don't remember exactly what. Was it with Pepperdine? I don't remember. But like, could you have like a link to that organization's website at least? Maybe he did. Like, they probably asked the guests for like social media links, and they just didn't give any. Maybe he didn't think to do that. So it's probably not in Jubilee, but you would think that would be there.
Well supported by gobs of science.
Scientific consensus is possible.
Scientific consensus is possible.
What is the question?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't understand
Scientific
like what the
consensus
objection
is
to that would
possible.
be. It's a little weird that the
Possible.
flat earthers
Anything
think.
is
I mean, maybe it isn't weird. Maybe I should say it's telling that the flat earthers don't think it's possible to have scientific consensus, because they were saying earlier like a benefit of their position is that they don't have a consensus. Which is crazy. And maybe that's why, like, no, it's impossible, which is how they reconcile the fact that they don't have a consensus. But like, I can't imagine otherwise why they would think it's impossible.
Possible. I mean, anything is possible.
Well,
I've got
how about I know?
I've got a tremendous issue with consensus and peer review. I've been spending a lot of
course you do.
time arguing with people that argue the other side. And I found that surprisingly, consensus always.
By the way, I want to credit where credit's due. A lot of flat earthers are really rude with how they refer to people on the other side. They'll be like globe heads or globers or whatever. Like, or, the fact that he put it as people who argue the other side, it's not like nice necessarily. It's not like a kind way, but it's not unkind. It's at the very least, like fair and like not rude way of referring to it. I'm glad for that, because a lot of flat earthers are pretty shitty about it. So thanks for that. I do appreciate it. Credit where it's due. Got to notice when people do cool stuff, even if it's small and even if you disagree with them.
Wins. It was shocking to me that the group with the majority has an incredible advantage. As scientists, flat earthers, truthers,
I hate that term,
punks,
truthers.
we're at an
Punks, what?
incredible disadvantage.
You're not
Let's
punks.
talk about
what?
scientific consensus. For
And
a
also,
second.
yeah, the like saying you're at an incredible disadvantage. Okay, again, it's the implication of like, oh, we're so downtrodden, don't you feel sorry for us or whatever. But like, again, if I argued something that was obviously untrue, I argue that the sky is, I don't know, magenta. Yeah, I'm also gonna have a lot of difficulty. Like, everything is gonna be against me, and I'm gonna have a lot of difficulty getting people to agree with me. And oh, the scientists are against me. Yeah, of course, I'm wrong, and a demonstrably scientifically determinable way. Yeah, it's going to be hard to convince people who care about what's scientifically determinable.
You're never going to get 100% of anyone. There is scientific consensus on a global Earth. There's scientific consensus on evolution. A lot of big
They
issues.
use the word theory.
Do you know what a theory in science is? An extremely
And a fact
Let
is
me-
a fact.
Don't mistake this word theory.
You are,
in
not me.
science. It's not conjecture. It's not.
It's an explanation. Is by
It's
definition, it's an
well
explanation.
supported
It's a
definition.
deep.
Well, let's talk
So this
about
is
a fact.
something.
Okay, what do we got here? Scientific theory. Yeah, so this is all. I'm glad this is here, because a lot of people think you use theory differently than some scientists do. That's not wrong. It's just a different usage of the word. A lot of times, like, I have a theory is like I have an idea, or I have like a hypothesis is the closer term that you would use in science. But in science, it's like it's one step below law. It's theoretically possible. See, I'm even using theoretically there. It's like it's possible perhaps to disprove a theory, but oh my, is that unlikely? It's just not, completely solidified. So let's see. Scientific theory: a coherent group of propositions formulated to explain a group of facts or phenomena in the natural world and repeatedly confirmed through experiment and observation. That last part, very important. It's that they're repeatedly confirmed through experiment and observation. It's not just an idea a scientist has. It's something that's been demonstrated. Perhaps not ascended to the point of law, but it is far, far, far more likely that not only is it true than not true, but that if there is going to be a challenge to a theory, that it is going to adjust how we view it and not reject it in its entirety.
Show me a
People
fact
made
then.
a mistake.
Why
They
aren't
think
all
theory
facts
is-
theories?
In science, the word theory is the highest level that you can give something because it's so well supported.
What about a fact?
That is a fact.
So theories are supported by facts, because facts. So again, like he's like, what about a fact? Because he's using it in the colloquial term, the way we usually use theory and fact when we're just talking between each other. If I say I have a theory versus I have a fact, it means something very different. The scientists are even explaining the definitional problem here, hoping that he can reconcile that, like he can follow along and be on board, but he's at a minimum not doing that. I don't know if he's unable to, but he simply isn't on board. So that's why he's saying, like, not what about a fact, but facts support theories. Theories aren't just like, oh, I think I have an idea. It's supported by verifiable facts. You can say like the fact of evolution, and that would be reasonable in modern conversation. It's just scientists tend not to use that word in that way. But like a fact is like, I don't know, the color of this bottle is black. That's a fact, but it doesn't prove anything. But a series of facts can prove a thing. And with stuff that aren't necessarily able to observe directly. Some people have directly observed the shape of the Earth. The flat earthers don't listen to those people. And obviously most of us can't. So instead, you have to use facts to support claims, and that's where you get theory from. When you can demonstrate through experimentation and evidence, you derive fact about things that you can't observe directly. And you can do this in a lot of ways. There are facts that demonstrate the shape of the Earth, like they were talking about the ships going over the horizon. That is a fact that ships that travel further away from you disappear bottom up. That is observable, verifiable. Like, flat earthers often reject it, but it is a fact of the matter. And it is evidence towards the theory of the globe Earth.
Well, not a fact you would call it a
You know
fact.
why? Do you know why? Because in science, there's always room.
Yeah, and of
for
course,
improvement.
scientific
There's always
understanding is like, it's always percentage. It's never I know 100%. It's I know 99% or 99.95. In fact, the likelihood of a false positive for scientific publishing needs to be less than 0.05%, or is it, or maybe it's 0.5. I don't remember exactly. It's been a long time since I took statistics, but like it has to be exceptionally low, and it gets compounded when there are more and more and more of these. So like with the globe Earth, it's not 99%. It's not 99.9 or 0.99. It's like thousands of nines behind the decimal place. It's theoretically possible that it's wrong, but the likelihood of that is so vanishingly small, it might as well not exist. And so that's why they don't talk about it as like fact. It's like it's hedging it with the like with an eye to the understanding that we can't ever know anything 100%. But that acknowledgement and that like humility gets in the way when you're talking with people who know 100% things that are wrong. And you can never muster the same kind of confidence, even though that kind of confidence is part of the problem.
room to find to tweak and find better information.
So that is how science works.
It gets better refined over time, as opposed to flat Earth theory, which never gets refined.
It gets worse
simply
over
is
time.
What it is.
New ideas have limited access to media and
okay.
limited exposure. Until we're in university curriculums,
But
we will continue to appear uneducated.
Well, okay, notice you claimed they're uneducated, not the other way around, so it's weird for you to like chafe at that. But also, you're not going to be in education because you can't demonstrate anything that you're saying is true. There's not going to be a conspiracy class. Sorry, buddy. It's compounded on top of that, like when you want to be taught in schools, what even is the flat Earth model? I don't know that all three of you necessarily even agree on on like details about it. Certainly the flat Earth community doesn't, and I don't remember if it was this guy specifically, but one of the flat earthers acknowledged that they do not have consensus, and he treated it like it was a good thing. I think it was this guy, but I don't remember.
Well, that's not true. In the history of science, we had many occasions that the ideas it was not welcomed by the society. Einstein was one of them.
Galileo.
Galileo
He said Einstein. The closed captioning it just said Iceland.
was one of them. But if your theory is an authentic one, and it can go
You
through
can demonstrate
this
it.
hardship of scientific method,
Yeah.
eventually will win.
Yeah, like new ideas are difficult, yes, but they're not impossible. And if you put them through the process, you can definitely prove new things are true. It happens all the time. In fact, it happens so frequently you don't even realize how frequently it happens. It's just a lot of times when it does happen, it's not super relevant to your life. But there are big instances where it happens, and we remember them. Einstein was a pretty big deal. He reformed in huge ways, or maybe not reformed, but like he changed in huge ways how we look at stuff and what we know about the world. Like he recontextualized Newtonian physics and like invented relativistic physics. Like, you know, there's so much stuff that like so many new ideas that came from Einstein and from the people subsequent. It's not like science ended with him. We just don't hear about it as often. But like the Manhattan Project, that was full of scientists that were learning stuff constantly about particle physics. Unfortunately, like that ended up being used for mass murder, but like the point remains, there's new ideas being determined all the time, and it's being done not by yelling about how NASA is lying to you. It's done through scientific experiment, through the scientific process, rigor, peer review. These are things flat earthers don't do. Publish a paper. Publish a peer-reviewed paper. You can do that. Now, of course, this is where, again, the conspiracy gets brought back in, because that doesn't happen, because these papers, if they ever try to make them, are never accepted. They say now, like, oh, it's because we know too much, they're trying to cover it up, yada yada, etc. So suddenly, like, the whole of the scientific community needs to be in on the conspiracy, and it grows again. And none of these people ever say, like, ever let on, ever, like, have a crack in the facade that they're covering this stuff up. They all know it, but no one says anything. Interesting that.
I used to believe that science was after the truth, right? We all just want to know what the truth is. Science has been trying so hard to divorce itself from the idea of a creator.
No, it just
when
doesn't.
God's intent was
Factor that
to
in very
create
frequently.
science.
You can be a religious scientist. That's very possible. In fact, Cam Gallon chat asked earlier a question that leads towards the understanding of how that can happen. Yes, some people have both scientific and religious explanations for stuff, and some of those people are scientists, and it doesn't necessarily make them worse scientists. It's just you do need to engage in methodological naturalism, but it doesn't mean you can't be religious. Some scientists, I've heard some religious scientists talk about how the things they learn through doing science strengthens their belief in God, because it shows them the wonder of his creation or whatever. Even though, according to this guy, you have to separate the two. You kind of do in practice, but no, science isn't, like, opposed to the concept of God. It just doesn't really talk about it. The supernatural is not accessible.
To lead you to him. Sometimes things seem supernatural that we are able to explain later through, science. Okay, I understand. But there are other things as well that are supernatural, that go beyond the natural.
But could you demonstrate
that we can
that?
only explain?
And I don't mean scientifically, at all.
Through believing in a creator, right?
This is my
Also,
big
this is
issue
completely
with
off topic,
science, scientific approach and non-scientific approach. You are absolutely right. In science, we are after the truth. And we are hoping by each day we're getting closer and closer to the truth. We never get there. Never.
Well, I know that's true for you. And
That's a science. That's you guys. You think
on, let me
that's
double check what he said.
getting the truth.
We're hoping.
And we are hoping by each day we're getting closer and closer to the truth.
Okay.
We never get there. Never.
Well, I know that's true for you. And
Like, notice how shitty the flat earthers are about it. It's like, oh no, that's true for you. He's like, no, he's not saying we can never know things, or that he's not saying he's wrong about everything. It's just the understanding, and it's kind of humbling. I don't know. It's moving to me on an emotional level too. The understanding that you will never know something. Not really. You can think it and you can be really sure, but you'll never really know, and you'll certainly never know everything. And all of us, even if we could know everything that could be known at the moment of our death, will still not know millions and billions and trillions of things that happen after, or that were happening that no one knew. There's so much we don't know. Shouldn't that, like, inspire, like, shouldn't that inspire in you, like, the urge to engage in science, to learn more, to shrink even by the tiniest amount the size of what, like, the amount that we don't know, to grow even the littlest bit what we do. It's a beautiful thing, and it's wonderful that science does, and that you can add a little bit and get more evidence and never get the whole, but still try anyway, because there's a beauty in that effort with success. You can have successes but never be successful. And it's bittersweet, and it's tragic, and it's beautiful in a way that I don't normally like. I don't normally like tragedies, but that is the exact thing that tragedy is about. And I think it's great. It's like, we are doomed to perpetual ignorance, but we fight against it anyway, and we make strides. We gain ground in the battle against ignorance. It's one of the best things about science. Kim Gall says, I heard that too. I hear that it's physicists that mostly say that, not biologists. Biologists deal with the harshness of life. Yeah, like, I don't know. In any science, like, even with biology, you know to a certain degree of understanding. That's what he's talking about. And it's to a degree of understanding where we're comfortable saying we know this thing, but technically we never know it. But we can grow and get closer to the truth, and we'll certainly never have a full picture of the truth, a full understanding of everything. And in fact, if we could, it'd be kind of sad. I think it was, I think there's another thing I picked up from Krauss. It would be a little sad. The day we learn the last thing that is capable to be learned is the day science dies. There's a beauty in the journey, in the discovery, and in the effort, the fight against the impossible. Where again, it's not just it's impossible to ever win, but we keep gaining ground. I hope that's meaningful for you, but I don't know. For me, I find that poignant and powerful, and I think it's one of the most wonderful things about learning in general, but science in specific.
So this is science. That's you guys. You think you do have the truth. Now let's look at the evidences, as you were mentioning.
And thank you, Ollie, for pointing out. No, the only people who claim certainty are the flat earthers. The scientists claim to have the truth when they're wrong. The scientists claim to have good evidence and not to know for sure even when they're right.
Have the conclusion.
There's a humility.
Let's find the evidences. Science doesn't.
And it's
work
important, I think, to point out that humility, because one of the aspects of scientism as an accusation is the profound arrogance of scientists to claim to know everything about the world, when scientists are the most likely to tell you they don't. There's such a overwhelming humility that I've heard a lot of scientists talk about, that you get from the more you learn, the more you know, the more you find out what you don't know. A great line, another thing from Lawrence Krauss that I remember him saying was astrophysicists had one number that they didn't understand for a long time, but particle physics was way ahead of them because there were a lot more numbers that they haven't understood for longer. There's an amount to which not understanding things is evidence of success, is that you've found new stuff to not know yet.
That's not true.
that's not what
That
we-
is not
Well,
true.
you are saying
No.
you are referring to Jesus, who many billions of people do not believe, including myself.
And many more billions do.
So
Well,
what?
who's right?
okay, hold on. He says many more billions. Most people are not Christian. Christianity is the most popular religion in the world. Of course, that probably wouldn't be the case if you listen to Christians about who isn't a Christian. There are Protestant denominations who think that Catholics aren't Christian. Catholics often think Protestants aren't Christian. Most people, a huge number of Christian sects don't think Mormons are Christian. So it's probably not the most common religion if you start factoring that in, but it's also not more than 50%. I think it's 2 billion people, or we looked this up previously on stream. I'm not doing it again, but it's Christianity is 2 billion, Hinduism's 1.5 billion, whatever. It is the most popular, but not more people are Christian than non-Christians or whatever.
Right.
Which is
Of
not
course I can
necessarily what he
know.
said,
So
but it
the-
was
When you say
implied,
that we
an
start with
implication that you could
conclusion and
derive.
then try to match everything to make it work, that to me is complete dishonesty. That
Wait,
is not
what does he-
true
what
to
did
make
she
it
say?
work.
So the
When you say that we start with a conclusion and
Yes.
then try to match everything to make it
Yeah,
work,
it's frequently a thing.
that to me is complete
Well,
dishonesty.
no, it's an observation.
not
I understand it
true at
doesn't
all.
feel like that,
That's
but
what
no,
you
you
are
do it.
doing
No,
right
you're
now.
not. You're making that assumption.
No,
which
he's
I think
observing.
science
I'm
does
sorry.
a lot of.
This is
Well,
never
you
going to
make
work with a flat earther, and that's why it's not super useful to say it to them. But no, it's an observation. Some of the evidence that has been stated, I know a lot of it is left on the cutting room floor with these videos, but so maybe they provided more things. But some of what's already been said is oh, my evidence is that I know there's a conspiracy. That's not no, that is exactly starting with the belief and making assumptions about what's true.
Assumptions or not? Does science make assumptions? Does science make assumptions?
Yeah, we
course.
sure,
Okay.
we do make assumptions
Everyone makes
based on
assumptions,
things
but also
that
the
are
assumptions in
well
science are
supported
much more
and
justified
proven and
than most other
reproven.
assumptions.
We don't have
Show
to.
me how you isolate gravity. If gravity
We
is
don't
an
have to-
assumption, you show me the
Oh,
scientific
for what it's
method.
worth, gravity isn't an assumption. There's lots of things that isolating gravity, I don't exactly know what she means by that. Probably like how can you demonstrate that gravity is the force? And like you'd have to remove all other forces, and like yeah, that would be kind of impossible. But there are other things that you can show to demonstrate the existence of gravity. Uh, first of all, like things like orbits do that, but of course they would reject a lot of this evidence. But like there was evidence found recently. I've talked about this before of like gravitational waves. We've found evidence of that. That doesn't. I don't know if that meets her criteria of isolating gravity, but it is evidence. Not. It wasn't. It wasn't intended to prove that gravity exists. It's so much as well. All forces exist in a field in physics. Isn't that's how I understand it. And so is demonstration of a gravitational field that can be altered through forces or whatever. That's what it was evidence of, but like that field existing demonstrates the existence of gravity. But also like what is her explanation instead of gravity, right? That's the other problem is what does the flat earth what does the flat earther say is like, okay, then why are we all like why do we all stay on the ground? Some people say it's like there's something exceptional about down as a direction. Some say there's constant acceleration up. Some say it's electromagnetism, which is demonstrably untrue. Most of these things are demonstrably untrue, but like no two have the same idea about it. It's not like you have a solution to that issue that you've made up. Instead, it's just disingenuously provided as like, well, you can't satisfy my ununderstandable position or like demand in a reasonable way. So I guess I'm right about the Earth being flat.
That's how you isolate
That's what she's
gravity.
doing. What do you mean isolate? And now they're stopping the conversation.
Yeah, sure.
Cooling off might be useful, but like, why are they fighting so much against? Like, why is Jubilee going out of their way to be like, yeah, I don't want the scientists and the flat earthers arguing about the truth of flat Earth at all. Why are they here? Why are they here if you're not doing that?
You're like a little round hard candy.
Conclusions require knowledge.
I just want to check in. How are you guys feeling? How's this discussion going?
I kind of feel like I want to develop some
Thank
of this stuff
you.
a little
Yeah,
bit
they
more.
keep
It feels
stopping you
high
as they
level,
get
but I feel like
into
there's so much
the
that
actual
I haven't
argumentation.
really even touched base on.
Yeah, because they
Well,
keep directing
I mean,
the conversation elsewhere. And I
certainly-
don't mean, when I say they, I mean like Jubilee. Every time they get into the subject of, okay, let's talk about the shape of the Earth and why we can know things about it, they stop the conversation. It's happened multiple times at this point. And so she's right. Like, she wants to actually talk about it. The scientists haven't like been the opposition to that. It's just the conversation gets cut off. And the questions that they're being prompted with don't let them really talk about the subject. In which case, like, why are they here?
They didn't think that anybody was on either side was going to flip.
Well, there's still time.
There's still time. I have hope for you, Wendell, and Shelley. I don't know about Dan. I have hope for you.
Yeah, definitely not Dan.
But, you know, it's certainly, I'm glad it's a
I
civil
actually kind of
discussion.
agree. I think Shelley, of the three of them, Shelley would be my best. I think would be the most likely to change her mind. Maybe. Oh, he just said it. Weldon? I forgot. Oh, he just said the guy's name and I forgot it. The guy in the blue in the back. Maybe him. Like, I don't know what his evidentiary standard is. He's a flat earther, so it's probably absurd. But like Shelley strikes me as like you could probably convince her. It's probably not going to be through a scientific discussion, for what it's worth. And it's not. I don't mean that like oh, she's just emotional as a woman. I definitely don't mean that. What I mean is people are often persuaded by different things. In her discussion of like what convinced her to being a flat earther, a lot of that had nothing to do with like scientific explanation. And I tend to hold like you don't really ever know what will convince somebody. What's compelling is not always the same as what is true, and that doesn't make it like wrong or anything. It's just like like you need different approaches for different people for different situations. The reason why I am now an atheist, and even though I was a deist prior, had nothing to do. Well, maybe not nothing to. It wasn't through like through argumentation about the non-existence of God or whatever. It was through like something I learned, like some scientific fact I learned. I'm not going to get into it, but like it wasn't an argument. It was a piece of evidence that was unrelated that made me have like following realizations. Okay. And I think that might be the case with Shelley. Probably with any of them, if they were to be convinced, it wouldn't be through a discussion of facts. So maybe it's not specific to her, but I'm talking about her mostly because I agree that well, he started with Wendell, I think his name was, but I think Shelley is probably the most likely person to change her mind of the flat earthers.
Oh, yeah.
Put your waters to the side, and we'll just do another round.
And that's just that's just like on a vibe. Oh, all right, that's a funny moment. And that's just on a vibe, by the way. Like I don't like.
Greatest moment in television history right there.
All right, that was a cute, funny moment. But all right, we've calmed down. Let's get back to it. NASA's just, of course, the flat earthers. Yeah, all right. Yeah, of course not. So it depends a little bit on what you mean by trustworthy. I don't think NASA is fully transparent about literally everything they say. They deal with satellite data, which means they're going to have a lot of information that is just not going to be made public. Some number of people who work at NASA need to have security clearance for this reason. Like, it's just part of what they deal with. And so, yeah, they're not trustworthy in the sense that like they're going to tell you the whole truth and all that stuff. But in the terms of flat Earth, they're not going to lie to you about scientific facts. In that way, they're definitely trustworthy.
So, I mean, obviously, any organization can be wrong with certain things.
So he's hedging, and that's fair. He's a scientist. They do that a lot because they are, again, that's like that humility that kind of comes with the territory. But, and I'm not saying all scientists are necessarily humble, but like there's an inclination towards that attribute. But also notice what he's saying, like any organization can be wrong. That's not the same thing as lying either, right? He's not even saying like any organization can lie to you, just they can make mistakes, which is fair and definitely not giving ground to flat earthers, though they might take it as that.
And they may have individuals that lie or deceive or something, but as a general organization, they're looking for the truth.
Yep.
Yeah, the idea that NASA and the government is lying.
Yeah,
to
and by the
us.
way, it's also not just NASA. It's space and aeronautics organizations from other countries that often have ideological disagreements with NASA and the United States. Like in the Cold War, the USSR was also launching spacecraft like Sputnik, and like the first person to go to space was from the USSR. I'm blanking on his name. I knew it. I used to know it, and I'm completely blanking now. But like the USSR was not going to like coordinate with the US to lie about the shape of the Earth as they're doing their space program. What reason would they have to cover it up? I mean, Stalin wasn't a great guy. I think it was under Stalin. Stalin was a pretty bad guy, but I don't know if he would care about covering up the shape of the Earth, you know?
About the shape of the Earth is the height of conspiracy theories. In order for this to be true, the literally hundreds of thousands of people who at some point over the last 50 or 60 years would had to be somewhat complicit in this, and nobody spills the beans at all, is on the face of it completely unbelievable.
The private does not know what the general is doing. There's compartmentalization happening all the time.
Yeah, so this is like the hedge they have of like, okay, not everyone at NASA needs to be lying. It just needs to be the higher ups or whatever else. But then the more you look into it, the more you realize that no, a lot of people at NASA aren't higher ups, but still have access to the kind of information that would demonstrate the like truth of the conspiracy or whatever. And so like, no, a huge number of people at NASA need to be roped into it. It's not just like the generals or whatever. Like the guy who monitors satellite information, like what, they hired him to look at fake information, or does he know that the satellite's not there? Or what about people who make satellites or who launch them? Like, you know, a lot of people, or people who deal with GPS, like a huge number of people a huge number of people's jobs would be affected, like how they do those jobs would be affected by the shape of the Earth. And so while it's easy to say, oh, it's just the people at the top who have to know, no, a lot of people to do their job need to know the shape of the Earth to do it. And so no, like a huge number of people would be in on this. It's not just like 6 people at the head of NASA or whatever.
Of course.
So it wouldn't be that far-fetched. Has the government ever lied to us?
Oh, and not just know about what's going on. These people would also have to be in on the cover-up. They'd have to never say anything about it to anyone ever.
Really the question at stake.
No, that's actually not true. So has the government ever lied to us is not the same as the answer is obviously yes. obviously every government has lied to the people of that country, obviously, or not even that country, that the people who they're governing, even like city governments have lied to the people or whatever, obviously. But just because they have lied doesn't mean they are lying about this. Notice the like leap that like needs to happen for what she's saying to make sense, but she's treating as like that leap is already reasonable. And it's not just the US government lying to us about the shape of the earth. It's a huge number of people, both government and non-government, and from opposing governments.
But
Common ground.
now we have NASA.gov, right? And absolutely, they're not lying about anything. They're
That's not
completely
the same.
transparent. Everything is true. We'd be
No,
foolish
Well,
to think that.
okay, they also didn't say that. Notice again it's like this is a very common Mott and Bailey that flat earthers will do. The obvious, like, everything is on there is 100% true, definitely, is not the position of the scientists. The first thing, I think it was Spencer, the guy in the front with the hat, said, the first thing he said in this section was, obviously any organization can be wrong. So no, you don't have to believe everything NASA says is true. Or even if they are, like, even if some stuff is not just incorrect, but also intentionally incorrect, a lie, it doesn't mean they're lying specifically about this, right? You'd have to demonstrate there is an interest in doing that before you can assume, like, well, therefore all the evidence is, like, what if NASA is instead covering up the existence of aliens? Everything that every conspiracist position that flat earthers take about NASA lines up almost exactly, as almost all of it lines up perfectly well. The stuff that doesn't is when they have like pictures of the earth or whatever. Like, okay, they're covering stuff up and they're lying to you, but not about this, about something else. But of course, again, it's the jump of you either believe that they're lying about everything and the earth is flat and they're covering it up and this is a giant conspiracy, or you believe literally everything that NASA says ever is 100% true and without error. Like, no, it's a very false dichotomy.
That's
difference
true.
here. I'm sorry. This is a fallacy here. There is
Not
a
a fallacy.
Oh, no, it's several,
I'm
actually.
sure it is.
Go
See,
ahead.
you were talking about a government. Now you're talking about an agency of the
NASA.gov.
government. But
Yeah, because it's
this agency
an agency of the
is
government, but, like,
scrutinized
yeah.
by thousands and thousands of scientists.
I did not
around
know
the
that, and that's
globe.
pretty
You
pretty
are
important.
dealing with smart people. Believe me, you are
I
dealing
don't
with
deny-
smart people.
I don't deny that.
So it
Well,
is
no,
very
she doesn't
hard
deny
to
that they're
do
smart. She thinks they're lying. You know, the saying that they're smart is like, yeah, maybe. Oh, I think what he was implying was different than what both Shelley and I took from that. I think what he's talking about is the people who he's saying are smart are the people who are scrutinizing. I think maybe Shelley even understood that that's what he meant by it. I think I misunderstood it at first. I think he meant the people at NASA. So maybe I'm the only one who was confused there, and that's just because I wasn't listening well enough. But yeah, like this is another way. Like, okay, I didn't know that NASA is scrutinized by these thousands of scientists from all over the world. That's pretty important because now all of these people need to be roped in too. Now suddenly, maybe not all of these people, but a huge number of them need to be involved in the cover-up conspiracy.
that once or twice, maybe, not for the all time.
There's even a saying that I've heard from someone who's not a scientist. It's from Larry Lawton, a YouTuber who makes a lot of videos about prisoners' rights and like imprisonment and stuff and having been incarcerated. It's a cool channel. One of the things he says is like there's a saying that, you know, two can keep a secret if one of them's dead. And it's kind of true. Like, it's hard to keep secrets, and the number of people that need to be in on these conspiracies is vast. It's massive. More so with Flat Earth than any of the other ones that we've encountered, but like the stuff with like vaccine stuff too is like the number of people that need to be in on this, and none of them ever say anything. It's wild, you know. Yeah.
What is the proof?
No,
Hundreds
obviously.
and hundreds of pounds of moon rocks and dust. And we have
Yep,
distributed
and suddenly all the people who
those-
handle those and are involved with like keeping them and studying them, all of those people now need to be on the conspiracy.
freely to PhD scientists around the world. And not one of those geologists has said, what is this?
Been
Is this
proven to
some-
be fake.
And also
Yes.
not
They're
collected
not
on
what?
the ice in Antarctica and
Yeah,
in the Arctic as
absolutely.
well.
There's
Yeah, so it's not that they've been proven to be fake. She's not even suggesting like why that would be the case. It's not really it wouldn't be, it would be a little weird if she did, but like, of course it's that these things have to be fake because it disproves their position. This is what I mean about there's no evidence they will accept. But like, yeah, we have moon rocks. Oh, suddenly they're all fake. How the fuck do you know? And no one has said anything about it. Again, okay, they've been proven to be fake. Let's assume that's true. It's not, but let's assume. Now all these people need to be added in. Everyone who studies these and acts like they are real is roped in on this? Or do you think they were all fooled? I mean, some of them wouldn't have been. If your dumbass figured out that they're fake, certainly scientists who's like literal geologists would figure that out, right?
Those are collected. You don't have to go to the moon to get moon rocks. As a matter of fact, all U.S. Air Force photography prior to 1958 shows a flat Earth. Only NASA shows a sphere.
Wait, hold on. Oh my god. That one hurt my brain a little bit. All right. All U.S. military images before 1958 show a flat Earth. Can anyone like imagine why it would be that before the United States had a space program, 1958, if I'm not mistaken, that the bright line he's drawing is between the existence of NASA and not. Why before NASA existed and before we had a space faring agency, there were no images that showed a round Earth. Do you think maybe it might be because no one had gone high enough to see it from space yet? Yeah, no shit, dude. Like, no. Do you have any idea how far off the surface of the Earth you have to be to see a curve? It's not trivial. Yeah, no shit. Before 1958, there were no photos that showed a round Earth. It wasn't possible to take photos. No one could go that high up to take a picture.
That is absolutely not
They're
true.
saying it's not true, so like maybe it isn't, but like, yeah, obviously. Like, even if it is true, obviously it's true. It's like saying, like, how do you know that there was an Earth in 1700? We have no pictures from that time. Obviously, because the technology wasn't there yet.
I wouldn't lie to you.
And the other
NASA's lying to you, my
the
friend.
other bit of proof
Not myself.
is we have a laser.
It's funny because the scientist didn't accuse him of lying. He just said it wasn't true. You can say something that's not true without lying. I know a lot of people don't think about it in these terms, but like, if you're just wrong about something, you can say it and it's not a lie.
reflector on the moon.
Yeah.
That we're using
The laser reflector measures the distance between the surface of the Earth and the moon.
now.
I mean,
Dude, we
so
still
like,
use to this day.
It's sitting there.
You can find to the inch how far away the moon
No
is.
pictures of home.
yeah, so they can easily dismiss that because they don't think that thing exists because we haven't been to the moon or whatever. But like, oh, no pictures of home. I mean, there are pictures of home. You just reject all of them. So like, you know,
By the
No,
way,
there are not.
My question to you is,
remember, it's like it's like the demand for evidence, and then as soon as you provide that evidence, that's not evidence, right? Like, nothing will ever satisfy them. They set lines in the sand. They set goalposts just so they can appear like they can be convinced, but obviously no, because like, no pictures of home. There are. Oh no, those aren't real. Then at that point, you're not actually setting that goalpost. You're pretending it exists.
why would all these
Thank you.
honest,
Someone asked the
hardworking
question.
people
Why do the cover up?
perpetuate this massive fraud? Why would they do this?
And we've heard different answers to this from different people.
Okay, the
Wait, did
benefit
they
of it.
switch? They switched seating positions so we can see a huge amount got cut out because. Oh no, they were sitting like this. Okay, I could have sworn the two in the back were swapped. Maybe the switch happened before this and I just didn't notice.
They make $52 million a day. Follow the money.
No, the little
Follow
guy.
the money.
The little guy.
That's what. Then when you say all, okay.
but it didn't start out that way. And NASA was not founded to prove the Earth was a globe. It had nothing to do with the way they were founded.
Well, if you go and study.
Are you sure?
Yeah, positive.
And also, like, remember, her response is like, why do this? Oh, because they get $52 million a day. Well, okay, NASA isn't like an individual who gets that. That's to pay salaries or whatever. Oh, okay, so NASA's doing this so they can have jobs. Or jobs doing what? Then why do they hire people? What are they hiring those people to do if it doesn't need to be done? If they're just taking the money? But also, non-NASA organizations would have to be in on this. All those scientists that Ali was saying or not have to, but scrutinize NASA all the time. All like other government agencies that do the same thing. Like it's not just NASA. You can say follow the money, but that doesn't answer how like a lot of people, even some of the scientists sitting there in this room, would have to be in on it for the conspiracy to be real, and like for what?
Really?
Yes. Somebody has to be a voice for reason, and somebody has to be a voice for truth.
Yeah.
It would be a fantasy to believe that I would change anybody's mind from the other three.
I don't
However,
completely agree, but in this context, he's definitely right. Of course, that's not what you're here for. You're here for the audience.
if there's somebody sitting on the fence, and this is the first introduction to this debate,
I really like
perhaps
these
they'll
scientists.
hear the reasonable
kind of-
voice and say, yeah, that makes more sense than having this pizza-shaped turkey.
I can put my
By the way, the reason why I kind of like the pizza-shaped Earth joke is that flat earthers so frequently will caricature the idea of a globe Earth by saying, "Oh, the ball Earth," or like you just think there's like a basketball in the sky or whatever, to like make it seem silly and delegitimize it. So like, why not? Like the flat Earth is very silly as a concept,
in the mindset.
and it's not ridiculing the person; it's ridiculing the belief. So that's cool. All right, I can put myself in the mindset of the other side. I almost can for the flat earthers. I don't know.
I used to be a ball earther. Everything
see,
you
ball
say
earther, not
right now
globe,
is
yeah.
completely what I used to agree to. So I completely understand where you're coming from.
For me, I think the correct way to do any kind of investigation or to examine things is by literally putting yourself in that mindset of the other person. So I do that. I
kind
don't
of.
disagree with your position.
Like to some extent, right? Like that's another way of phrasing the thing I say, which is, you know, ask yourself what would have to be true about the world for them to say what they did. Like what would have to be true in how they think about the world, so on and so forth, for what they said to make sense. That is an amount of like putting yourself in the other person's shoes, but like there's an amount where it's not, and like I don't know, I don't know that I could fully think like a conspiracist. I can understand what they're doing, but I couldn't think like that, and so there's a limit to how much I can get into the other person's perspective.
But I completely understand from your perspective what you're saying.
I can understand the appeal of some of the beliefs, especially if you hate Jews. Which I'm not saying that the people sitting here do, but a lot of flat
The
earthers
trouble
do.
I have understanding your perspective is,
In fact,
the
part
modern-
of like the appeal to flat Earth for some people is that it justifies their hatred of Jews because it says, "Oh, look at what they're doing. Of course I hate them. They're deceiving the world and yada yada, etc." It justifies their pre-existent hatred.
world, unless you live in a cave somewhere, you have to believe in science implicitly.
Man, we have
I
really
met a
taken
flat
our time
earther,
with
a
this
young woman
half-hour
who said,
video.
"I don't trust anything that science
I talk
does."
so much. I hope you all
And
enjoy it.
That's a problem because human beings can't replicate the whole body of science every single generation. At some point, you have to trust what's already been discovered and proven and move on to the next thing. Otherwise, we're not going to advance at all. I mean, when you turn that key ignition in your car, you expect the car to start out.
And not blow up.
And
Yeah,
not-
and this is something scientists say a lot, and I think it's often, I think the impacts of it are often not felt by the people they say it to, which is that the same science, the same scientific method, the same tools lead to conclusions that you trust and don't realize that you trust, and yet you reject them. You reject other conclusions because you just don't like them, or erroneously or whatever. It's not. And some of these understandings are necessary for things you use all the time. So like turning the key in your car, the scientific method leads us to an understanding of how that works and also the shape of the Earth. That's not really the same information, but it's the same process. Whereas like GPS literally requires an understanding of the shape of the Earth, of relativity, so on and so forth. It couldn't exist without not just the method, but also the conclusions, some of the conclusions derived by it that you reject, but you trust that, right? I don't know how they think GPS works because it is necessarily contingent on the shape of the Earth and relativity and a bunch of other, and like satellites and so many other things. But I don't know, do they not think GPS works? Do they not trust it? But it works. I don't know.
blow up because science puts you in that position. So it's really hard to understand how people would know in their hearts that science achieves wonderful things and then just jumping ship when it comes to this other issue.
Well,
We're not
as Ali pointed out very clearly, and I know he's not like confused by it so much as like pointing it out. Like, but as Ali mentioned earlier, it's because they have a belief that they're trying to get to, and they will reject anything they need to get there, and they will accept anything they need to get there. Obviously, again, I don't think the scientist here, I think his name is Spencer. I don't think he was confused on that prospect or like uncertain about what's going on. He's just pointing it out, but like that's the answer, right?
drawing conclusions. We understand the mechanisms that made that car work.
Yeah.
There was no theories and no disputed conclusions involved there.
I mean,
it's
there
not
could
a good
be.
analogy.
It's just no.
Can
I mean, it's only not a good analogy. So this guy doesn't understand the point of the thing. The only reason there's nothing in dispute is because there's no conspiracy theory surrounding it. But if someone invented a conspiracy theory around how your car works, like, oh, they're lying to you, it's actually like you know, harnessed hamster power, or like something less ridiculous, like they're channeling the supernatural forces of God inside the engine, and it's a conspiracy to enslave God into a position of mechanical, and they're lying to you about the big fuel industry, and like, oh, big oil is just, look how much money they make, that's why they're doing it. Like, if that conspiracy existed, it'd be just as rooted in reality as flat Earth, and it would be, then suddenly the facts are just as contentious, even though there's no sense to it. It's all made up. I literally just made it up right now. But the only reason there's anything contested is because of your conclusion. What the scientist was trying to say was just that the only reason you accept one and not the other is because you have this conclusion you're trying to reach. You should, if you trust the process that got you one, why do you only reject it here when it comes to the flat Earth?
Isn't it a great compromise that we have to experience being against the grain people? Is we have to literally sit in a group and decide whether or not we can afford to have an
What do
opinion.
you mean afford? Oh my God,
that's tough.
the baby
I
shit.
actually-
I think things that aren't true when people tell me. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, if people disagree with you, hold fast. No one, like, you're not like losing your job over this shit. You're not like, for what it's worth, there are some things where like, yeah, I don't know, if you're a Nazi and you lose your job over that, I think that's fine. I'm not saying he is, but like, oh, can we afford to have an opinion? What? No one's gonna get up and hit you because you said you're a flat earther, all right? Grow a pair.
I agree with you there because we're the same thing. I mean, I think skeptics go through this and atheists go through this. I don't believe in God.
For what it's worth, like once he's like bringing that into perspective, there are places in the world where being an atheist will literally get you killed. And this guy is whining about, people disagree with me online. They say I don't know what I'm talking about. The scientists in this room didn't even claim he was uneducated. Like, understand the charity that's been giving to this guy, and he's still whining about it.
Around religious people, I take a chance socially when I tell them I'm an atheist.
Yep.
So I know it takes
And that's
some
also like often overstated because in the United States, for the most part, not really going to have that much bad happen to you because because you're an atheist. There's like some social ostracization, and like maybe a little bit people will, like maybe there are places where people will take really unkindly to that, but like it's not really much of a thing. And it's still more of a thing than like the flat earther. Like maybe he's complaining because like colleges won't hire him as a professor, and he's like, look, I'm losing my job, but that's not like, okay, well, that's nonsense, right?
courage to follow your beliefs, and I appreciate that. But I think I've done a lot of research in that venue too. And it's not something I choose to believe in, it's something I have to believe in based on the evidence.
Yeah.
See, what I get from you guys is that seeing is believing. So how come you believe in God or Jesus? You haven't
Oh, he started so well, and this is so bad. Like, okay, if you like the seeing is believing thing, I thought he was going to lead that into like, okay, here's a clear thing that we can show you, and anyone can take a look at. Now, he's tried this with the ships, and they've already rejected that. But like to like lead into, well, then why are you religious? It's just so off topic. Like, it's not necessary for this conversation, and it makes it like, especially to the conspiracists, like, look, they're attacking my religion. They're trying to make you not believe in God. By the way, one of the only reasons I've ever heard a flat earther try to give for why this conspiracy should exist is because they're trying to take you away from God. So like, I don't know, maybe he doesn't know this, or maybe he doesn't care, or maybe he's not thinking about it. Like, this is just such a bad line because it to the flat earther, it's like, see, they want to make you not believe in God anymore. They're just trying to take you from the faith. That's why you have to believe the earth is flat. It's stupid.
Neither of them, right?
I've seen evidence, though.
Well, exactly.
Well, there's a
So
lot
you're
more
looking
evidence
for
of the
evidence.
earth being
There
round
are
than there
many,
is for
many
the
other
existence of God.
evidences for Earth not being flat. My point is that these experiments clearly show that the Earth is globe. And you don't need to go outside
It's
the
a
globe to see it's
conclusion.
globe.
It's a
You told me you
theoretical-
want the evidence. If you're
That's
saying
not-
that you look only to see something, then I dispute your belief system in God and Jesus or Jehovah or Buddha or Zarathustra or anyone.
You keep going back to religion as being
Because
our
it's coming
conclusion.
from there.
No,
You think
no,
you do
no.
have the truth.
So this is a mistake. This is a mistake that can be made. Like if you're not super familiar with flat Earth, yeah, especially given the first question that we saw, it can seem like they believe it because it's in the Bible, but that's just not the case. It's not really a Christian belief. It's just a thing that's often it can be rooted in Christianity once they've gotten there. It's not really like biblical, and so like yeah, kind of a mistake to think that that's what's going on here, and that and like going after religion to argue against the flat Earth. I think it's kind of a mistake.
I have evidence. I have evidence.
You
for
quoted
what
at
I
the
know.
beginning
She
of
pointed out
this.
physics.
You
I
quoted
agree.
Bible.
Of
That's
course
the
I did, but
reason.
that is not
Yeah,
the
exactly.
only
It's not the
reason.
reason. So it's like it's backfilled. Before she believed in a flat Earth, she could wave away those passages in the Bible. Now that she does believe, they matter. It only matters because of what she believes now. It's kind of like what you were saying before, Ali, where like she started with the conclusion. Now this counts as evidence. Now we care about it. It's not derived from there.
know what the shape of the earth is, and you keep that's fallacy.
It's not fallacy.
It is a
Actually, it
fallacy.
is not fallacy.
It is a fallacy.
And for what it's worth, so it's not a fallacy. She's using the word wrong, but it is incorrect. She even said out loud that the reason that like what her like how she got to where she is now, and how like her husband didn't believe in the moon landing, and then he died, and then she was like thinking about that thing he said, and then she like went online and found all the flat earthers or whatever. It has nothing to do with the Bible. Hey, Ned, this is a good time for them to actually cut. Like, I'm actually okay with them cutting the conversation there. That was getting heated.
What I'm doing
and
is the
going
combination
nowhere.
of string theory and cosmology. So we try to understand what happened during the Big Bang, after the Big Bang, or even before the Big Bang.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
Well, I hope I would be able, particularly to the young generation, to convince them that first they should think critically and don't believe anything. They shouldn't take anything for granted.
So again, this is that like advice towards skepticism, which is good, and I agree with. It's just you be measured, right? Like there are it's not the same to say you should be skeptical and not take things for granted, and to say therefore you can't believe anyone ever, like the scientists tell you it's all part of a big lie. Like you can go too far with it, and I think that's often something that conspiracists do. What he's actually saying is very reasonable.
The evidences and examine those evidences.
This is also the first person I've seen who says
and
evidences
throw away
that isn't like
those
a conspiracy
claims that are not
infrequently.
evidence-based.
Or usually a creationist is the one who will say.
Science, not to put it down, but when you're talking about rocket
She's about
science,
to put it down.
this is very difficult for the majority of people to understand, and it's designed that way.
Well, it's not designed that way. It's
And
just
so,
like, it
in
just
a
kind
lot
of
of
has to be
ways,
like that. If it were
hiding
easy, we
behind
would have done it
rocket
sooner.
science is similar to religion.
No,
if you look
it's
at
not.
the Catholic
Not even a
Church
little.
back in
What?
the days, only we can interpret the
So like things that are like hard to understand are not the same thing as things that are like shrouded in mystery. Like you can learn about rocket science. You can go to school for this. You can read books about this. You can even teach yourself stuff about it. You probably can't learn a lot of it by yourself because it is very complicated. And this is the value of education. There's a lot of things you just can't learn by yourself, but you'll have a lot harder time learning on your own as opposed to with the help of someone who already understands. It's normal, actually. It is not the same at all as the Catholic Church. I think what she was getting to is the Catholic Church, until like the 1960s, insisted that like Mass had to be held in Latin, and like interpretation was the sole purview of the Church, which meant the congregants were basically prohibited from understanding, and that's not the same thing at all. You are not prohibited from understanding rocket science. For what it's worth, rocket science is also not the only thing that's relevant here. But even if you could understand how to make a rocket, you couldn't do it yourself the infrastructure you need for that, it would be insane.
Bible, you have to listen to what we say.
No, you don't.
So in
You
a
can
lot of
learn.
ways,
You
we're
can go
getting
learn.
that same notion from
Like, people
science.
learned this in the first place. Like, the first people to build rockets figured it out. They had to learn it on their own. You could, in theory, do that. It's just really difficult, and so most people can't and won't. On top of the fact that it's not necessary. You can learn from other people. That's okay. Like, it's so weird that she's arguing against she's implying an argument against the concept of being educated by another person.
That says only we can interpret what these numbers are. You just need to trust us.
You can go
But
to
then
school
when we
for
actually
this.
do go and test some of their equations and they don't work,
Well, you don't understand
does
them.
that beg the question
they
for
do
us to
work.
go
You
and
just don't
test it
understand them.
ourselves? Absolutely.
I would say, one great thing about science is its predictability.
Yup, it
Let's
works.
For some moment, for a short moment,
Novel
assume that your
testable
model,
predictions.
this flat Earth model, is correct. I don't know, what does it buy for us? What does it predict for us?
It predicts things that will get us
my
killed, by the way.
question for you guys would be, next time, bring me something from your theory, your model, that you can predict something which the globe Earth model cannot predict.
They never
Then
do this. It's a
I would
great
change my
challenge.
mind.
A flat earther,
I would
the
just
flat
say
earthers
that
never do
Don't believe anything that I've said. You got to do your own research.
that. Now, when a conspiracist says do your own research, obviously they don't mean he probably means do your own experiments and assumes that you'll misunderstand things the same way he misunderstands. He doesn't think they're misunderstanding. He assumes you'll find the same conclusions because he doesn't understand what he did wrong. But if you do your own research and learn stuff from NASA or whatever, that's not what he means, right? He means go on YouTube and watch flat earthers.
And I think what you'll find is that you'll see that a puzzle piece doesn't fit. And the only way you're going to do that is if you put your own eyeballs on it.
I don't blame people for being skeptical. I'm skeptical about a lot of different things. I applaud that instinct.
Skepticism
in you.
is good. Yeah, it's great.
But you have to go
you
beyond
can go too far. You
just
can be overly skeptical.
not believing in something. Ask.
And for what
the
it's worth, flat earthers aren't skeptical. They believe uncritically, non-skeptically, as thoroughly as a person can believe a thing, something that's not true. Right? So it's they are not skeptical of the world. I missed that. I really hate that implication, which he wasn't really implying. He wasn't really setting out, but flat earthers often are like, "Oh, we're just the skeptics," or whatever. No, disbelieving in verifiable fact is not what skepticism is.
Hard questions. Ask what qualifies a YouTuber, a book author, anywhere else you're getting this information.
Which is not from published,
what qualifies
peer-reviewed
them
papers
to make wide-ranging comments about the shape of the Earth. Look, anybody who can overturn Einstein or some major theory is going to be eventually written in the halls of science for the rest of their lives. But they have to come up with the goods. They have to show good science-based evidence that what they say is true, and they have to withstand the test of time and peer review and the rigors of the scientific method.
All right. Thank you. I'm all sweaty.
Ollie, it was nice to meet you.
I'll get a hug too.
Almost neighbor.
Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, it sucks that they didn't really get much into the actual evidence.
Thank you guys for watching this episode.
Whew, that was a lot. It was fun though. It was neat. I kind of wish they weren't prevented from talking more about the actual facts of the matter, but I mean, what are you going to really talk about? I liked those scientist guys a lot. It seems like I keep finding interesting stuff in flat earth stuff. Maybe I should reach out to some flat earther to argue with them. That'd be fun. Well, in any case, thanks all so much for watching. I'm going to get going now. I got stuff to take care of, so I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you next time. Bye.